Okay, good afternoon, everybody. At this time, we will reconvene the 4 p.m. session, and nothing to report on closed, but we will again recess after our public hearing to continue our discussions. So at this time, if you could please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This time we'll move on to public comment. Anybody wishing to speak on a matter that's not on the agenda, please complete one of these orange forms and provide it to Susan, our city clerk. Anybody wanting to speak on a matter on the agenda, we will call you during that agenda item. We do have a couple of requests to speak. The first one is from Patrick Swarthout. If you could please, when you come up to the podium, give your name and address for the record. Thank you. How are you, Patrick?
I'm doing good. Patrick Swarthout, 78705 Avenida La Torres, the only true bed and breakfast in the La Quinta area. And I'm here for, you've seen me in front of you for a lot of different reasons to do with the ID, but this is really personal. Last Tuesday, 1 week ago, my wife was out walking her dog when a young lady at the end of La Fonda, she was on, and I can't pronounce the name of that last street that's over there, Tamazera or something. Anyway, it's the last street next to Washington in the Desert Club Estates. As she was walking north, there were two pit bulls. All she could see was the rear end of them, and a young lady holding them. They cut loose after my wife and the dog, and the young lady could not hold them, control them at all. They drug her for a little bit, and they got away from her. They jumped up and bit my dog on the chest, who survived heart surgery from December 1st, only to, my wife said, this dog is not going to die after that. Got her right in the middle of it, and the dog clamped down on her right elbow. Fortunately, it was the elbow because less damage was done there than a meat area. She has 15 stitches in her elbow, and she can only straighten it out to about that far right now. We believe there might be some nerve damage, but we don't know. We'll just have to wait and see what the healing process is. So afterwards, the animal control officer contacted us. He came over. We showed him pictures of the wound, opened and closed, and we also shared the pictures of our dog, Dusty, who has 13 stitches in 7 and 6 in her chest. My concern about this whole situation is, I asked him, are they going to euthanize the dogs? And they said no. They are going to give them back to the owner. And he told us, his understanding was that this young lady is not going to keep them. She's going to return them to wherever she got them from. And I don't know if she's a foster dog sitter or what she's doing. I don't know the whole situation, but in the following days, my biggest concern walking in that area, and I've lived there since December 2013, I've never seen a large dog of any kind that seemed threatening at all. These are brand new into the neighborhood, and evidently they're not going to be staying. But my biggest concern is as we're walking we're walking Friday, Saturday, and Sunday of this week, or just last week after it happened, to get Dusty out and get her back into the normal routine and to also get some fresh air. And I've seen elderly with a little tiny dog. I've seen mothers with their children and small dogs. And I think that if anything else happens because of these two dogs, not that they're going to come back here, but wherever they end up, I know there's some requirements that they have to be muzzled now when they're walking, all of that, but who follows the rules? So I really, and I don't know how much authority that the city council has over this, but I really think that these two dogs should be euthanized. They attacked a human being and they attacked a dog and drew blood. And we are very thankful. There were two construction workers on the corner of Palermo and La Fonda that heard the screaming and the dogs barking, and they came over and actually pulled the dogs off my wife, because the young lady that owned the dogs or has the dogs could not get the dogs off my wife and the dog. So we were very fortunate to them. I've stopped by this job site several times to thank them, and just, I was not around, and I was at another appointment, but it just, you know, you get a phone call, your wife's been attacked by 2 pit bulls, you just, there's no pit bull in my area. What do you mean? So I really look to you for at trying to do something about not allowing these dogs to go somewhere else and do more damage to another person.
Did you call animal control, did you say?
Oh, animal control showed up.
Okay.
Along with the police department and the fire department and the ambulance. So they were there right away. And animal control immediately went to the young lady's house, quarantined the dogs, but they're going to be released this Thursday back to her.
Okay, I'm sorry. They're at the animal shelter?
They're at the animal shelter right now.
Part of the impound process.
So then they should go through some sort of behavioral analysis?
Again, I don't know the process.
We
I
need to know
he
that.
has checked
Yeah.
that they are licensed, they are, have all their shots, they're up to date, and everything is okay as far as the legal side of things. I'm just concerned that even a behavior analysis, I don't believe they were chasing my wife, I think they were chasing my dog. And because my wife got in the way, they went after my wife.
So I know that we prior council has set laws based on how we're dealing with the dog attacks and the levels of severity and or the fines for various things, because I had a similar issue where it was the owner of the dog that was very upset because the dog was getting euthanized as a result of attacking. And it was based on the definition of vicious attacks, and there is a third-party entity that we use that has a hearing process that determines that level, and depending on what violation that particular animal had already had on record, and then the severity of the injury helps determine whether or not they're euthanized.
So who's the third party?
We use, thanks, Les.
Well,
And or clarify if I got that out of order, so feel
yeah,
free.
First of all,
I'm really.
terrible to hear about the news and
Yes.
what transpired. That's it's one of those matters that it's very disturbing to hear about. There is a procedure and protocol. I just heard about this just a few minutes before the meeting myself, so I haven't had a chance to even talk with our animal control supervisor to find out all the details. But the typical procedure would be just as what transpired. As our officers respond, the animal is detained and is taken to the shelter and is held for a period of time, and that's typically 5 to 7 days, depending upon the situation. In this instance, it sounds like the animals were licensed and properly vaccinated and whatnot. So, and I don't know if they actually reside here in La Quinta or where that residency is, but because there's an incident, immediately there's an investigation as to the severity of the situation, and if it does, as was represented, if it does meet our definition of vicious. In the situation that Mayor Evans mentioned, that particular animal had a history prior, and as well as the attack that did occur to that particular individual was it was quite bad. They were, not to say that the situation that happened at the Swarthouts wasn't,
right.
but it is reviewed on a case-by-case basis. If deemed necessary, there can be a situation where we do involve a hearing officer, but typically it's an administrative decision initially with regards to the determination of vicious or not. That matter can be appealed, though. But it's typically a matter that we review, and then we do also have, again, a hearing officer procedure, and it's a third party. There's a handful of actual hearing officers we use for a variety of animal and code-related cases that will come in and conduct hearings and consider the situation. So in this instance, with the animal that was euthanized, that did go to a hearing officer. It was their conclusion. We've had other situations where the decision's been made and there's been a series of conditions or stipulations that have to be met. And sometimes we actually inherit those. There's a dog recently that came in from Palm Desert where a decision was made not to euthanize, and we ended up inheriting as that family moved here and having to administer those conditions and terms as well. So we do follow up when there is an animal that does have a record in our community. There are conditions and stipulations. Our officers do administer that and review that and follow up, making sure the dog's properly secured or whatever those conditions may be.
Madam Mayor, if I can, I mean, to have a dog that deliberately goes out to attack, doesn't protect its owner, doesn't protect itself, isn't, you know, somebody's picking on the dog actually goes out to attack somebody or another dog. I mean, that's a vicious dog, and we don't need that type of dog here in La Quinta. I mean, we got bodily injury by Mrs. Swarthout and their pup. I mean, we need to do something other than, all right, turn the dogs back to let them go, you know, bite on somebody else. And we're just lucky no one was actually, or the dog wasn't killed or something like that. So hopefully, whoever this third party is understands the viciousness of these dogs. And they just don't go home and everything's great, because I would imagine if they attacked here, they've attacked someplace else. And I mean, that's a pretty vicious dog that goes out to look for something to attack and bite and potentially kill.
Well, it can't be controlled by the owner.
Yeah,
That's
I mean,
another
that's
concern.
ridiculous.
Yeah, and again, I would need to, I don't know all the details on the case and what has transpired since the incident to be able to even, and unfortunately, I can report back and provide that information to all of you, but at this point in time, I just couldn't tell you all the details to even know exactly what, it sounds like the decision has been made not to euthanize, but that's still, the dog is currently being detained, and I will be looking into it, if not today, first thing tomorrow morning, and find out exactly what the situation is, and we'll make sure that we correspond with all of you and let you know exactly what's happening.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Les.
Thanks.
And Les, I'd really appreciate it if you'd let me know what's going on as well, because the only reason we're here is we don't want somebody else to get hurt by these dogs.
appreciate that.
And, you know, when you walk in the neighborhood and you see that the families are there and they could have done that to anybody, it would have been devastating to know. Now, she lives on La Fonda, and my understanding is, again, she's given them back to the agency that she got them from. I don't know what that means. I don't know where they're going or, but, and I've never seen them there before, so they are relatively new. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our best to Leah and Dusty.
I have, just, could I make just
Sure.
one point? Les, what's the next step for the Swarthouts? I
Besides
know
being
that.
afraid to go outside.
I know that you, you gave us the rundown and everything, but there are a couple things hanging for me. I'm kind of, show me what the next process is, and do they have, if the dogs are released, do they have an appeal process? How do we, what do they need to do?
We typically, that's a good question. I haven't had that one asked before. It's usually the other end where the owner of the dog is the one that's appealing our decision, only because quite often there are very strong stipulations or conditions, or we're asking it to go to an officer for consideration for it to be euthanized. In this instance, obviously, first of all, they have the ability to address the matter with the owner or whoever, or custodian of the dog from a civil standpoint to address the damage that was done. As was the case with the other situation, there's an actual civil matter in process with that, I believe. But in this instance, yeah, I really don't know for certain. I don't want to say something incorrectly here, but what I would do is I'll investigate again tomorrow, report back. I'll talk to Mr. Swarthout directly as to what his rights and options are. Because to be honest, I've never had that question asked. Usually it's the other end. It's the owner of the animal that's asking those questions, and we're often because we're going to a hearing officer with a recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, if I may, just a question, Les. It took 4 people to mitigate this attack on 2 dogs. These dogs weren't going to lead up by themselves. I imagine that this administrative process has to keep in consideration the kind of force it took to take control over those 2 dogs. It's not like they can only assess the damages as they occur. There was a tremendous amount of human power there to mitigate what was occurring. And I think we have to really be careful here. It's not only the damage, and the damage was great, but it could have been much worse.
Certainly, and we've had, not only with this situation, but there have been a history of, not just with this particular breed, but even other animals where we've had packs, if you will, that have come together, that same situation. And we've even had it where it's been different owners, and the animals have come together and have taken a strong position against another animal, or on a couple of instances, neighbors have attacked without provoking. So certainly each case has to be reviewed and considered on the merits of that case, and that will be the situation that will occur here.
Okay.
Thank you, Les.
Thank you. Okay, next request to speak, Alan Worthy. Alan, come on up.
Well, thank you for having me. I was deposed on the 19th, and so obviously I'm prevailing along the way here.
Name and address again, please, for the record.
I'm sorry?
Your name and address for the record.
Oh, Alan Worthy, it is P.O. Box 6051, La Quinta, California, 92248, as I am homeless, living between the streets of the desert and Venice Beach in L.A., which is no day at the beach on that boardwalk. It's quite a horror. The crime is just an absolute nightmare. The LA Times has been diligent in covering it, but it's, worth noting, also because I wanted to mention, if you read the Desert Sun, I happened to see it at Starbucks one morning where Mayor Punier and Jenny Fote have started a task force for the homeless. I found that quite ironic. I mean, could it have anything to do with the fact that I went around to all the city council meetings reading that article when they, in fact, outlawed the homeless a few months ago and ran them out of downtown into the north end of town where, of course, the shopkeepers and people were concerned, and on the south end, because remember, I said south means east, since this is the desert. And east means La Quinta, and I'd already seen a gentleman down here at the Spouse parking lot that I recognized from Palm Springs. So, now I'm one of them, thanks to everyone's malfeasance and our egregious behavior, as my condo just simply sits there locked up. Since it was virtually paid for, my HOA got ahead of me. I did not live there for 2 years because my mother and I lived in Rancho Mirage, and it didn't lease. And anyway.
What can we do for you today, Alan?
Well, that's, I see your lights are not on. They're not working today?
I'm not.
Oh, okay, so anyway, well, yeah, I wanted to mention that about, I find it ironic that Mayor Punier, they started a task force. I guess I made enough noise. I don't think I was out of place months ago when I said you perhaps reach out to your respective counterparts in Palm Springs.
Communication
ask
works.
what's going on. I did leave a message, or more than one, for City Attorney Doug Holland. I finally spoke to him once prior to a city council meeting, and I don't really understand. The apathy is, in fact, the issue. This issue of, who did it, they still don't care, obviously needs to stop. It's absolutely bizarre, especially when one of the criminals, as I've said before, lives right up here in your suburb, as I've called it. And, God only knows where my grandmother's china is, at his house or the caregiver's house or God knows where. It just went on and on and on. Apathy, not good. Mrs. Eddie Cossin, just alertness to duty, she says right here in the manual. So thank you for your time, and I would ask you to reach out, Mr. City Attorney, to Mr. Doug Holland and ask him what he could possibly be thinking as he continues to not respond. It's bizarre. Thank you.
Thank you. You look well.
I'm sorry?
You look well.
Oh, I'm
you.
stronger all the time.
Very good.
Thank you.
Glad to see it. Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's bring up Shannon Sessions. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Name and address for the record, too, please, Shannon.
My name is Shandon Sessions. I live at 52195 Avenida Herrera in La Quinta, California, 92253. And I'm here again representing Organic Solutions of the Desert. I'm the Vice President of Operations. We're just, once again, coming in to fill out the water on the city's take on lifting the ban on the medical marijuana issue here in La Quinta. We're currently operating in Palm Springs as one of the few licensed facilities. We worked closely with Doug Holland and a lot of the city council members there to acquire a safe access point for these patients to come and receive their medicine. Right now, we're servicing around 16,000 patients at our facility, and I believe our last number take yesterday afternoon, we had about 3,285 of them were La Quinta residents. So, and then upon that, we had about 2,000 more that live farther towards Indio from La Quinta that drive through La Quinta to come to our Palm Springs store. So we're kind of out here looking to see if maybe we can provide a safe access point for these patients to come out and access their medicine in a safe manner where it's well regulated. everything at our shop that we do sell over the counter is fully lab tested. We send everything off to a third-party lab, make sure there's no pesticides, no molds, make sure it's all medical grade that we're giving these patients. We're one of also the few facilities out here in Southern California that's been educated and has learned how to grow full CBD medication. We grow a medication that has no THC effects at all. The tetrahydrocannabinol is what gives you that euphoric kind of head high feeling that, you know, isn't what a lot of patients want nowadays. You know, we are one of the few dispensaries who specify in a CBD related strain that we do grow in-house to provide for our patients. The demand on it, you know, is increasing as it goes on and it becomes more popular. More and more doctors are reaching out and telling their patients to try the CBD just to help with the effects of chemo to the treatment of cancer. Right now, we're trying to reach out and maybe provide another point of access for these people in a safe, legal manner. And once again, you know, we extend our hands to all the council members. If you guys would ever like to come and see how the facilities ran or any of the day-to-day operations or books, by all means, you know, we run a full up-to-date business that is above board. You know, you guys are always more than welcome to come on in and check it out.
Okay. I will say that I did do a follow-up after the last meeting to ask our attorney, you know, our status based on current ordinance versus federal law, since it's technically still against federal law. I don't know if you want to report out on.
Well, sure. As the mayor mentioned, we did look into this. The Quinta Municipal Code Section 920-050 does currently have a ban, which has been affirmed by the California Supreme Court as constitutional under California law. And during the last budget cycle at the federal level, there was, as part of the budget measure, a provision where the funds that were allocated under that one-year bill were not supposed to go towards enforcement in those states that have legal medical marijuana laws on the books as far as the federal government is concerned. But the federal government has not made marijuana legal, and it's still a Schedule II drug. And so that is the status for the benefit of the council and where things stand right now as far as state and federal law.
Yeah, basically the Fed said they would no longer use the resources to go into states or cities that are doing fully regulated medical marijuana dispensaries like Palm Springs, and are trying to set the standard. And I mean, in Colorado, we've seen the explosion of growth out there and the recreational and medical aspects of both sides of it out there. And with the new laws, you know, and them not using the funding to raid, you know, licensed facilities, I mean, it's basically we're going to end up with any other task force where alcohol, tobacco, and firearms are all legal, but we also have a task force against the illegal black market of it, you know, and that's what we're trying to get rid of out here, especially in the valley, is the black market, and bring everything up above board and get it taxed and regulated so that people are able to find a safe and access point.
Yes, Colin.
And I'll direct the comments to the city attorney. It still would not prevent us from looking at developing or approving an ordinance in La Quinta if we decided to lift that ban. Is that correct?
Well, that's, to actually lift the ban, there would need to be an amendment to the municipal code and a change in the current zoning code, so there would need to be some amendment, which would mean you certainly could look into what the replacement could be. But as of right now, it's still banned outright in La Quinta.
Okay, thank you.
And that's also what we're here for too, you know, we know that you guys don't want to just lift the ban and have the Wild West open and have 100 shops try to flood in and open up, you know. We worked, you know, closely with Doug Holland in the city of Palm Springs to make sure we had an ordinance that was set up to where it was, you know, it wasn't easy to meet the ordinance, and we undergo, you know, 2 to 3 safety, fire, and police checks every year that, you know, we meet our requirements for, and that's something that not only our dispensary, but any other dispensary you guys permit out here, you know, we would like to see. Basically, all it comes down to just we want to help patients here in La Quinta, so.
I appreciate you getting the numbers to follow up in terms of residents on this end of the valley. That's helpful.
Yes, ma'am.
In the consideration.
All right, guys, thank you
thanks,
so
Shannon.
much.
Okay, and our last speaker would be Nolan Sparks.
Honorable Mayor, Council, thank you so much. I'm Nolan Sparks, 77751 Robin Road, Palm Desert. I'm a 20-year member of the YMCA Board of Directors, and I'm just here today to mainly thank the council and staff for all their support. We serve about 150 to 200 kids a day in the La Quinta area through programs at like at Wolf Waters or Vista Dunes, where we emphasize nutrition, fitness, provide healthy snacks, computer classes, homework assistance, things like that. We got the La Quinta preschool right over here that we're just so proud of. We have preschool classes and children's age elementary entry classes. They eat, not me, obviously don't eat there, healthy every day, nothing out of a can. Breakfast, lunch, and a snack. We're able to provide that for them. We have great sports programs up at Colonel Mitchell Page with flag football, soccer, t-ball instruction, that sort of thing. We're partnering with you coming up the 21st of March with the first of the 4-year Olympic deal for 3 to 8-year-olds. We're all excited about that. We're expecting maybe 200 participants, what we're hoping for. And over at La Quinta Preschool, February 27th, we're having a family fun night. We have this at our preschool sites throughout the valley. It's a great time. If not doing anything, come by. Silly games, just seeing the kids that get to participate there, have their families come out, big brother, sister, grandma, what have you, and just, play some silly games and just get to celebrate with one another. But it truly is the wise privilege and honor to serve the kids of La Quinta, and we couldn't do it without Edie, her staff, and all your support, and we're just here to say thank you today.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. And they put on a great golf tournament.
Okay, with that, we'll move on to confirmation of agenda, and the goal would be, as staff is requesting, that we switch the business and the study session order. If you're comfortable with that?
Yes.
Any other changes by council members?
I would like to just pull consent 3 and 4 for a short discussion.
For comment only?
Yeah, comment.
Is it not separate vote? Okay. All right. At this time, we have no announcements, presentations, or written communications, so we'll move on to the consent calendar. And I would say we call for a motion second and do comments.
Second?
Okay. Then vote. I'm sorry. I was going to do the comments during it. Oh. Oops, wrong button. Okay. There's a motion and a second on the table for the consent calendar as amended. Please vote. The red buttons do work. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, let's go with item number 3 first. Christy?
Okay. These areas that we're talking about, this area that we're talking about is currently stabilized? Okay. And then is there any egress on Calle Amigo? My reason for the question is if we decided to use this area for something else, but we're not putting landscaping on the back part of that, are we?
Well, the plan is it'll have landscaping around the entire perimeter. It's just we're kind of doing a different concept on the Amigo side. We're doing a minimal plants and we're kind of clustering them, but there will be planting and DG around the entire perimeter of that lot.
Okay, so if we decided to use it for parking or something, that wouldn't be a big problem.
We should be able to find a spot where they could drive between the plants and the rocks, basically.
Right. No problem. All right, thank you. And on number 4.
Move adoption consent 3.
No, can we do it again?
Oh, sure. If you want to, you can do both.
I'll just do both together. What's your comments?
Okay. On consent 4, what HOA are these folks going to belong to? Les?
Everything that's been identified to us, because we don't get into too much detail on HOA discussion, but everything that I've heard is that they would have their own, that they're not going to be within the Norman, that section. How do I describe it? They're under the umbrella, I guess, of the, is that Fairways? I get them all mixed up out there. There's so many of them.
I don't know the answer to that. There are quite a few out there,
But
yes.
I believe they're under the umbrella, but I was under the impression that they were kind of taking care of themselves, if you will. But I don't know that for a fact. We all too often don't get into that level of detail of discussion and conversation. That's usually a matter for them to have to work out as to setting up their association. I do know that they have a relationship, obviously, with that association, with that access now that's
Well, that's why I'm asking. So they're coming through the Norman course onto Brown Deer to get to their subdivision. There's no access off of Monroe. So my question was, is this one of those situations where they're going to be able to call themselves PGA West like Alta Verde? Is the HOA, I want to know if what would be the advantage to the Norman course, which is a public course, which already has enough traffic, for them to use those gates? I don't get that, why they couldn't just go off Monroe, I guess.
I wish Mr. McDonald was here because Jerry was the one that,
Is he,
Oh.
somebody's in the back.
they may know the answer. So that's why actually the gentleman from Ontario thing.
Okay.
Name and address for the record, too,
Hi,
please.
Steve Zabala. Actually, I live here now. I represent Woodbridge Pacific Group. We are the builders for that project. And yes, it is, because of this amended map, it was amended because we wanted to join the Greg Norman HOA. And that entry into the Greg Norman is now the main entrance into the site. The previous map showed the main entrance being Monroe. That's not going to be turned into a emergency exit right out only scenario. So our main entrance is now the new one that was devised for the submitted map. So yes,
So
we
you're
are.
going to be part of the PGA West
Yes,
HOA?
ma'am. Yes, ma'am. That was a big coup for this project for us, absolutely. Yeah.
And that was approved by whom and when?
HOA, tentative map was approved, council approved map.
No, I mean, I'm just talking about PGA and the HOA.
Sure, that was, then they have a,
Okay. All right, thank you.
okay.
Thank you, Steve. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Is there a motion for 3 and 4? To approve consent items 3 and 4?
The motion, I'll make the motion to approve. Second?
There's a motion and second. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. All right. We will move on to study session first. Fiscal year 2013-2014 year-end, fiscal year 2014-2015 mid-year update and reserve policy review. Hello, Rita and Amy. Let's start with the staff report.
Good afternoon, our Honorable Mayor, members of the council. I know that's probably the longest title of a study session you've ever seen, but we combined really 3 study sessions into one because they're all connected. So first we're going to talk about the year end of fiscal year 2013-2014, and the report that you got on that is really to be viewed as a companion piece to the CAFR, which was distributed, and that's the business item next. Just want to point out that the difference, there's some differences between the CAFR and our budgetary management reports. They serve different purposes. So the CAFR, one of the goals of the CAFR is to try to express the city's opinion more like a business. So, for example, our infrastructure is included in some of the statements. Long-term liabilities that maybe aren't going to be paid out in the current year. So, a member of the public could look at that and think, oh, the city of La Quinta has a net position of $600 million, and we know that we can't sell our infrastructure. We know that that's not the case. So that's why we're going to do a quick recap of 13-14 as you're used to seeing it from a budget point of view. And then we're going to do a very quick update on our projections for 2014-15, and that will lead into giving you an overview of where our reserves sit, what our current policy is, and then some of the hard work that the IAB has done, the Investment Advisory Board, to come up with kind of a benchmark to send you off on further discussions.
Great. And for those that weren't at the last meeting, our large screen is permanently unavailable. So we've got the side projector that we're working on. If you need to adjust your location in the room to see the slides, that'd be great.
Okay, yeah. So for 13-14, you can see that our income, revenues and transfers in were 38.7 million, and expenditures, carryovers and transfers out were 35.3 million. The reason I include carryovers in there is they weren't actually expended, but they're money that was budgeted in 13-14 that is getting carried over into 14-15, and it's going to be expended. So if you want to get a true picture of what funds were budgeted in 13-14, it's good to include the carryovers in that amount. Before we get into the general fund revenues, and we tried to just do a lot of charts since the Jumbotron's not working, because the charts kind of give you an idea. You can see them, get the idea overall. The city, 69% of our revenues in the general fund come from 4 sources. So, you know, the saying goes, when one of those hurts, we all hurt, because we're dependent on those 4 sources. Number 1 is sales tax. Then property tax, TOT, and motor vehicle licensing in lieu fees. So for 13-14, revenues came in about 3.5 million higher than budgeted, and we'll get into that a little bit more when we talk about property tax, but a lot of that's due to a one-time payment that we got in property tax that we're not going to get again. So it kind of distorts the picture a little bit. And revenues were about 5.3 million higher than 12-13 levels. Sorry, we're trying to operate 2 screens at once, so. Sales tax is relatively flat. It was about 2% higher than 12-13 levels, and it was came in only about 1% higher than what was budgeted. So those were turned out to be pretty good estimates. And then property tax, you can see on the graph, if you back out that 1.99 million that we received in one-time payment, property tax is rather flat too, and the estimate was pretty close to what the actual came in at. In 12-13, property tax was about 199,000 lower than 13-14, and then property tax adjusting for that one-time payment was about 74,000 higher than what we had budgeted. TOT is an area that's really growing and due largely to the short-term rental vacation program and efforts focusing on that and collecting TOT on those vacation rentals. For 13-14, TOT actually came in about 11% higher than what was budgeted, and then compared to 12-13, it was also about 11% higher, which is about $669,000 higher, which is quite a bump.
We knew it could be done.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
Right. And with TOT, there'll probably be a point at some time where it kind of levels off to these higher levels, because right now we're getting a lot of people that we didn't have before. So you won't see it taper off, but you'll just see the growth kind of steady at some point. But that means that we're doing a good job and we're catching most of them. For motor vehicle in lieu, this is the short explanation is we get a subvention from the state that took the place of motor vehicle license fees, and it's based on a formula, complicated formula from the state. They tell us every year what we're going to get. So it was about 4% higher than what was budgeted, and then the same with the year before, year-to-year actuals, about 4% difference, because we budgeted exactly what we got in 13-14. And we usually get some kind of notification during the budget process what that amount's going to be. For 13-14, some of the other areas, there's a lot of line items in the revenue budget, so we just wanted to point out the 4 big ones that really affect us, and then some of the other highlights. Plan check fees are 29% higher than budgeted, so it's development related, and miscellaneous permits as well, 40% higher than budgeted, and public works permits were 122,600 higher than budgeted. So that's an indication of development picking up, and good sign. So general fund 1314 expenditures, I talked about that a little bit in the beginning. The number that, the actuals are 33.3 million, but then if you include the carryovers, which we know are funds that we're going to just push into the next year, that's about 35 million. Carryovers were about 1.8 million. So before counting the carryovers, expenditures were about 3.6 million less than budgeted, but if you include the carryovers, that savings shrinks to about 1.7 million.
If I can ask
Yes.
a question, thank you. Now, the 13-14, including the carryovers, I mean, those original budgets included carryovers from the previous year as well.
Yes.
So, I mean, we've got carryovers continuously. So
Right.
I don't know how much was carried into 13-14 versus what's carried over to 14-15.
About $1 million. It was about $1 million, $1 million, and it was just right at the $1 million mark.
So about $1 million was carried into 13-14?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, it's part of the normal process, really. There's always you're exactly right, some carryover.
Okay.
And what made this year's carryover a little bit higher was there was a lot of general fund CIP money that hadn't been expended, so it's a little bit higher than, it was about 1.5 million. Okay, so then for general fund expenditures, we're just touching base on the departments that appear to be over budget, and it's not on this chart, but public safety, police services, in 13-14, overall, they were over budget by about $170,000. There was a payment that should have been made in 12-13 that was made in 13-14. It's kind of been a cycle of always paying that last payment in the new year. So the decision was made to correct that so that all the payments related to that year are in the right year. So that payment threw the budget off in 13-14 because there was an extra payment in there. But then in 14-15, we should be back on track having the correct payments in the correct year. So. Then you're looking at a graph that shows you the other departments that appeared to be over budget. When you look in the CAFR, you'll see that, and in my report. And these are the departments were Finance, Public Works Administration, Public Works Streets, and Public Works Engineering Services. And you might recall this from last year, and I think Councilman Osborne brought this up last year. I listened to the tape from last year to see what you all did. And if you look at, there's reimbursements that are credited to these departmental budgets based on what we think is going to be offset from other funds, primarily the CIP, but sometimes from the successor agency. So if you were to adjust for those, because reimbursements came in about $500,000 lower than what we had expected, if you adjust for those, when you're just looking at the true spending in those departments, then you can see by looking at the graph, that little shaded area shows you the adjustment for reimbursements. And then when you're just looking at their true spending, they're not over budget. And one of the things we want to do for the new budget cycle is stop netting those reimbursements against departments because it distorts the picture. We want to show that as a revenue instead so that it's a little bit clearer. And we can always compare the two if you want us to, but I think it causes a lot of confusion in the CAFR and other areas because it appears that there was wild overspending in some of these departments.
Yeah, I mean, and we talked earlier, getting the engineering on this report, there's another 300 and some odd thousand above
Right.
budget. And assuming that that's, again, what you're talking about here.
Yes, exactly. So we've made it all the way to 2014-15. And we're just providing a quick update, a mid-year update to the revenues and expenditures. The revenues overall, we're projecting are going to be about $884,000 higher than what was originally budgeted. And a lot of that has to do with that 13-14 came in a lot higher than expected. So we're kind of matching the 13-14 level, in some cases maybe increasing it a little bit. So for 14-15, the revised estimate is about 2% higher overall. And revenues overall still are estimated to be about 5% less than 13-14 because of that one-time payment. So that kind of is an anomaly that distorts the picture. So the major areas that are affecting or increasing our revenue estimate are TOT. TOT was budgeted lower than what came in 13-14, so we're just bringing it up to that level, increasing it to about 7%. And when we do the budget process for 15-16, we'll review these estimates one more time for 14-15 to see how those are doing. For property tax, we've made the, excuse me, the adjustment for the one-time payment. There's also a distribution that we get from the redevelopment property tax trust fund. It's kind of the excess that gets distributed to all the taxing entities, and that is an ongoing amount, although it's been in flux right now. But last year, it came in a little bit higher than we thought, so we're bringing our level up in 14-15 to that same amount. It appears it's the ongoing amount is going to be about the same. Now, we don't know in future years because it has to do with how much we get on the ROPS and what's left, and there's a whole array of things that go into that. But for 14-15, it looks like we could at least bring that up by $312,000 for that reason.
Yes. Okay. This may not be under property tax, but we are scheduled to receive X number of dollars on an annual basis for paying back the loan. Where does that appear?
That, you're giving away the ending, but.
Had I known, I would have held back on
But that comes up when we get to the reserves.
Okay. Just as long as it's in there somewhere. Okay.
No. And then sales tax is rather flat too, and there's two parts to sales tax. There's the actual direct sales tax that we receive, the 1%. Then you may remember back in 2005, 6, or 4, 5, there was this convoluted thing called the triple flip. Right, which hopefully will be winding down and the state will be paying those bonds off. But they do an adjustment every year because a portion of what we get is related to that, and they just released their adjustment. So for 14-15, it's going to be $86,000 less than what we were originally, the original estimate. So we've adjusted for that. Then licenses and permits, which include primarily development-related items. We've increased our estimate by about 6% there. In part to bring it closer to 13-14 estimates. We adjusted it slightly based on discussions with development services. It seems to be tapering off a little bit, but we felt we could bring that up 6%. And then charges for services are also primarily development related, plan check review, various things like that. And that we've estimated is going to be about 11% higher than what we originally budgeted based on 13-14 and discussions with development services and public works about the trend going on with those categories so far this year. Before we get into the discussion on reserves and fund balance, there's a few recommendations for you to consider that, we're just looking for guidance now. There's no motion for these things, but if the direction is to go that way, we'll bring them back at the next council meeting. One of the things in the CAFR you'll see there's a reserve for insurance premium increases, and in 13-14, there was a payment that we made that actually had to be recorded in 14-15 because of timing and, when we made the payment. So we reserved the unused funds in 13-14 in the fund balance. And so we're requesting that we appropriate those funds that were set aside to actually pay them out. Then we're also requesting that we can amend the revenue budget by the $884,000 as outlined, the various categories here. And finally, community development is requesting $80,000 for temporary and contract staffing to keep up with the increase in development. And the revenues have increased about, I'd say, in community development, about $160,000 in total. So he's requesting, community development's requesting $80,000 to keep up with some of that development. They don't want to add permanent staff at this time. They want the flexibility. If development decreases or that, excuse me, activity decreases, then they can decrease the use of those temporary services. So those are the three items that we'll be looking for your direction on to bring back at the next meeting. Okay, now the final part of our discussion is about general fund reserves. And back in August, the council directed that we take the item to the Investment Advisory Board to get their feedback on what would be adequate reserve levels for the city, to review the policy we have and if they have any recommendations for amending it. And they worked really hard and batted this around from August to January. During the process, requested a lot of information, wanted to know what are the policies of cities in the area, the policies of highly rated cities with high bond ratings in the country, what some of the needs are that the city has. And I think they came to the realization that while there's a lot of guidelines for minimum recommendations, there's not a lot of guidelines for maximum recommendations, what is too much. So before we get into the current policy and their recommendations, let me just go over the fund balance with you on this chart here. You can see, and we tried to condense it because there's a lot of categories within reserves per policy and non-spendable, but we try to condense it into three just so that you can get an idea. So the three categories on each of these bars are non-spendable and carryovers and the reserve for OPEB, which is other post-employment benefits, retiree medical. Those things are set. They're not the non-spendable we can't spend. That's things that are like land or funds owed to the city from other agencies, like what Councilwoman Franklin was pointing out, the loan owed to us from DOF. So that's the black part of the chart. So you can see a big chunk of our reserves is non-spendable. Then the little striped area, that is the area really that the council is reviewing and trying to decide what to do with that, and the unassigned or available for appropriation. That's your reserves for emergencies, cash flow, and we'll go over the current policy. So that is the kind of window you're working with. And depending on how much you increase that, your unassigned will go down. So it's a zero-sum game. Just, are you going to put more into these other areas and then reduce the non-spendable, or put less in there, or increase the unassigned, or put less in there and the unassigned would go up? And another term for unassigned is what we use in the CAFR, meaning it's not specified for any one thing. And after talking with Councilman Ratty, I came up with the budget term, which hopefully explains a little bit better, but available for appropriation, because that's what it is. It's available for appropriation. It's there, it's the council's purview, and there's a lot of priorities that the IAB would not be aware of that are council priorities, so that funding is there for those decisions. So just generally on this, because I know there's a lot of information, but from 13 to 14, you see that the non-spendable went down, and that is because the state, originally the RDA, the former RDA owed the city $41 million, and the state came in and took our money, and so we booked that as a loan that was due to the city. And then the state came in and reviewed it and said that 6 million or so of that amount was not allowable. They disallowed it. So we had to adjust our non-spendable and essentially write it off for that amount. We have no say. They just tell us it's not allowed, and it's not a dialogue.
Non-negotiable.
Yeah, right. So that kind of explains the change in non-spendable. Then the change from year end 13-14, so June 30th, to July 1, the major change there is that the reserve for carryovers is now budgeted in the new year, so that goes away. And when your budget goes up, so do your reserves, because your reserves are based on a percentage of your budget. So there's more that went into those designated reserves and less in spendable because of those things. So June 30th, you have this much in emergency reserves. July 1, you're operating off a new number, so they go up, unless the budget went down. So then we're going to get into the policies, but for estimated at the end of this fiscal year, we show it with the current policy and then with the proposed policy that IAB recommended, which we'll get into. But one of the big differences here is the payment that you were asking about. We originally put on our ROPS that we were scheduled for a $600,000 repayment of the $41 million, which is now $34 million. And after a lot of back and forth and dealing with the Department of Finance, and the city attorney, myself, and Amy McCormick, our business analyst, we actually went up to Sacramento, and that $600,000 turned into $1.7 million. So without getting into all the mechanics of it, there's a formula, and there was a lot of more distribution in the redevelopment property tax trust fund than what was originally thought, because we did a refinancing of bonds, and that lowered how much money we needed, which created excess, which created more to be able to pay back on our loan. So that we can talk about when we bring the ROPS forward.
Good.
But the good news is, yeah.
Good pace.
But it's very confusing. But and the good news is they agreed, and after working through it with them, they agreed, and we got notification that we were going to get 1.7 million rather than 600. So we have a letter.
Yes.
We have a letter. So
Keep in mind, we gave away $6 million.
Right.
So, or I should say we gave it away, they took it.
Right.
They stole it, but regardless.
yes, and they still owe us, 34 million. So. And then the only other thing I wanted to point out is that 1.7 million, that you see that reflected in here as increasing our unassigned and decreasing our non-spendable, because it was a non-spendable item. It was a loan owed to payment owed to us. But now that we've gotten payment, that reduces that and increases our cash. So without getting into a whole bunch of mumbo jumbo with reserves, those are the big things. So let me just go over our current policy and then what the IAB considered and talked about. And I think we have the chairman of the IAB here today. I just saw you sitting out there, Jennifer Donay. So she and the rest of the board labored through this for months, but I think they came up with a pretty good policy or starting point if you choose to go, a little in another direction. So currently our policy is a reserve for cash flow, which is 8.25% of budgeted expenditures, and then a reserve for emergencies as defined in the municipal code, which pretty much locks it down for like natural disasters. It has to be something catastrophic. And that's 35% of budgeted expenditures plus 4 million. And then combined, that equals roughly 54.25%. We had to try to turn that 4 million into part of a percentage, but at the time we did this, that was roughly 54.25%. IAB is recommending that the reserve for cash flow or working capital be increased from 8.25% to 10%, 40% for emergencies as defined in the municipal code, so the catastrophic things, 9% for economic stabilization reserve, and 1% reserve for federal, state, county takeaways. So combined, their recommendation is 60%. And I'll get into really quick some of the things that they considered, and then it'll kind of be back in your court to talk about it and see what your priorities are and what you think. But some of the things, the guiding principles and rationale that the board used was that setting reserves really is like buying insurance. What's your tolerance to risk? And if you have a high tolerance to risk, you might think you don't need as many reserves. And then the golden rule of budgeting, one-time revenues for one-time expenditures. Reserves shouldn't be used to fund ongoing expenditures. Reserves for capital improvements, equipment, those kind of things should be part of the budgeting process where you're always budgeting a contribution. You're not just setting a one-time amount out there and no way to repay it. It should be kind of a revolving account. And then the proposed policy just sets minimum requirements only, because there's lots of guidelines for minimums, but really every agency is like a unique individual and only they know what their maximum is. We're almost to the end. So the category of reserve for economic stabilization was created because the emergency category is locked down just for catastrophic natural disasters. So they wanted to carve that out a little bit so you could have a reserve if there was another, Great Recession or something like that. The category of reserve for federal, state, county takeaways, the board felt there was a need to carve that out from the economic stabilization because they want to show our vulnerability to state and federal decisions. And then, of course, any council priorities for specific items aren't included because the IAB doesn't necessarily know what those are, but you might have specific projects or uses that are of importance to you, and you could certainly make that decision to budget for those individual projects. So now we come to the end, and if you have any questions, let me know. And Board Member Donay's here if you want to ask her about her battle scars from the process, and turn it over to you now, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Very comprehensive report and good news, which is what we want here in La Quinta. John, I'll start with you if you have any questions or comments.
No questions, probably some comments, because I know that in the past we've gone over what percentages are right and what percentages are too high or too low or whatever, and we've dealt with that over the years. My concern was that we were always very conservative, yet the state continued to take our money. There's no assurances in the future that they won't be able to take the money that we set aside for these emergencies anyway. That's a concern that I have. Or do we kind of throttle that back a few percentages, spend the money while we have it on public projects, therefore they can't take those away. The $6 million that they took away just recently, if we would have had those appropriated for something, we could have used them, we could have kept them here. So we are always conservative, we are always on budget, yet we don't know what the state can do or what they can't do. We thought we were safe when we loaned the redevelopment money and then got paid back, and yet they came back and clawed that back as well too. So that's a concern. The concern that I have is that it's not kind of what we're going to do here, but we can't anticipate what the state will or will not do. So.
Lee.
Well, first, I want to thank the IAB for their work on this. And this is a tough project, and you guys really did a great job. I really want to thank you for all your hard work on this and your discussions on this matter. Second, I'm a bit reluctant to get into too much of this. I'd like to have our city manager here today to get his input on these things. I mean, this is a pretty big matter. Not that we're not well cared for this evening, but I would really appreciate Frank's input on some of these matters. It is extremely frustrating to have the state tell us that we could charge a market rate 15 years ago on our loans. We have to use 0.5% interest rate instead. And their take of $6 million. They hold no value to the cities of the state, but regardless of that. The reserves in other areas, I mean, the reserves for capital budget, the reserves for economic development, and the reserves for pension liability. I mean, and you know, we all, cities here in California have this underfunded pension issue looming out there. And it's hard to get a real handle on what that number is. I like the numbers that we come up that have been suggested by the IAB in the sense of, you know, the 10% for cash flow, the 40% for the reserve for emergencies, the stabilization and the reserve for the federal and state. The state's going to do what they're going to do. They rewrite the laws according to what they need at any one point in time, regardless of the needs of the cities, regardless of our conservative nature to build those funds. Regardless of that, they'll mismanage their own spending and take from us to make up the difference. I'll try to take it easy on the state, I'm sorry. But the aspect of reserves, I think we need to include reserves, again, for capital budget issues, for infrastructure issues, you know, whether we're going to make some large improvements to drainage someday in the future, or we need large costs to maintain infrastructure. We need to be building these funds up in some manner or form. And obviously we may not have the funds at this point in time to build what that need may be in the future. Right. And perhaps someday we'll have a wish list from a capital budget standpoint, you know, and all right, here's what we're going to need over the next 10 to 20 years to give us an idea of where we're trying to approach that reserve fund. An economic development standpoint, to have an economic development fund, whether it's to buy land for the city or other functions for the city, again, that's something that I think we should have some reserves for going into the future. And again, as I mentioned, the pension issue. If we're underfunded some amount, $7 million or something, I think we should build reserves and be aware of what that number is and be ready to handle that number in a prudent manner and not be surprised. I think most cities won't be able to handle their underfunded pension reserves, but I think we can, and I think we should recognize that in some manner or form. And as John said, again, I'm asking a question I don't know the answer to. How can we create these reserves and set them up in a manner that is not easy picking for Sacramento? But that's you know, an impossible question. I realize that. I mean, when I was in the court hearing in Sacramento, listening to the judge tell us that since we didn't have anything in our loan specifically stating that if the RDA would ever be liquidated, we could ask for early payment. And then he kind of laughed and said, but how would you ever know that 15 years ago? So they'll write the rules as they need to take what they want to, but in some manner or form, they still seem to have recognized a contractual obligation of funds. And so at one point, I wouldn't want to tie our hands with contractual obligations on these funds because we're going to need some flexibility going into the future. But how do we create some manner of contractual obligation, some manner or form, that you know, when the state comes calling 5 to 10 years from now, we will have some manner to say, no, those are specifically obligated, contractually obligated in some manner or form, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I'm sure our legal staff will give us some
Yeah, I was going to say,
phenomenal manners to do that.
probably need our attorney to weigh in on that.
Would you like me to weigh in now?
Yes,
or?
sir.
Okay. Well, I suppose a couple items to address both of the concerns raised as far as the state taking city revenue. Yes, there's always the uncertainty of what they may come up with next. I know the triple flip and the VLF swap was very ingenious, and you know, I don't know if anybody could have predicted that. On the other hand, there are now constitutional protections for city sales and use tax and property tax that theoretically should prevent a future triple flip without getting voter approval to do it. Maybe they'll come up with something else that will try to get around that. As far, and the same is true with property taxes, where if there are shifts of property tax revenues different from what the city had been receiving, there's a two-thirds majority vote requirement now under the Constitution, again coming about after the triple flip. None of this, when this was put in place, affected redevelopment money or protected redevelopment money. That's what led to the dissolution, and so that's where we are now on that. As far as contractual ways of having reserves, I suppose, better protected, because I don't know if I could give 100% guarantee, but if you are wanting to look towards the impairment of contracts, constitutional protection, there are perhaps ways of setting up escrow accounts that will deal with specific reserve items where the money could be put into an escrow and can only be drawn for a particular use or something that you may want in the reserves. But that's not, that money may still be sitting there and could only be drawn for a specific use, which means the council would likely be tying its hands on what those reserves may ultimately be used for. So.
Question, John?
Which, raises a question. We contract with the Sheriff's Department. Would it be possible to set up a contractual reserve for any kind of increases or unanticipated expenses as it relates to police services?
Off the top of my head, I can't think of a reason why you couldn't. I'd need to research it to be sure.
That's a great idea, because that's an ongoing cost that we'll have every year.
Every year.
And so, I mean, police services are what they are, and we're gonna have
Still
that
have to have
going
money
in the
to
future.
fund it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and or public safety, services along those lines.
As long as it's for a public purpose.
Correct.
Okay.
I like these ideas, and these are something we're gonna have to look at. But I would just ask, the council, again, looking at capital budget and economic development, or excuse me, reserves for capital budget and economic development and our pension. In regards to the reserve for emergencies, are those the funds that we used when in 2009-10 when we had to go into our reserves, or 10-11 when we had to go into our reserves, about 2.7 million? What reserves were used at that time?
Maybe Edie could fill me in on what that situation was. That was
Just
before
our
I was
annual
here.
budget was in the red at that point, and we spent reserves.
I think that was the unassigned reserve fund. that was
Yeah.
used for that.
Yeah, it was an emergency.
I would guess that's what it probably was, because it wouldn't meet the definition. You're saying for economic downturn?
Right.
It was
Yeah.
a budget shortfall.
Right. You would have had to take some specific action to use the emergency reserve. That wouldn't have met the definition. So you would have had to amend the policy.
With that reserve number, I mean, we've got, you had the actual number in here, here you're suggesting $14.4 million. And then it's suggested in this that take a 4/5 approval to use any of those funds. Again, I wouldn't want to tie our hands on those funds. If we had a major impact on our revenues, again, we've talked about TOT, if we lose any one major hotel
Right.
or resort, how that's going to impact our revenues, thus impact our funding for expenses, we've got to be a manner to get into those without, someone passing away or something.
To clarify on that, I believe the 4/5 vote was to amend the policy.
Okay.
But you could use the reserves as long as you're using them for the designated use. So if you needed it because there was an economic downturn, you could do that without a 4/5 vote. I think the 4/5 vote was if you were going to amend the actual policy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe we need to take a look at that policy for emergency reserves to make sure we're still comfortable with that as well. But that's all the questions I have. Again, I hope at some point we can have this discussion too with Tom, or excuse me, with Frank here. Thank you.
Christie?
Yes. I have a question for our attorney. They can't do another triple flip until they've paid this one off, right? Wasn't that the way it was supposed to work? Well, I know they can, but technically.
The way it was structured, that actually required a vote of the people statewide to approve it, was so that it would be a one-time deal. And that once those revenues that have been pledged to allow for the triple flip to happen, once those are paid off, then it would not be used as another, that would not stay in place to then try to pay for other state programs.
Okay, somewhere in the back of my mind, I just recall some sort of loan that the state, or money the state took as a loan from the cities, and they couldn't do it again until it was paid off.
Yeah, the 10 million.
Right.
Is that what it was?
Yeah, that was,
What was
yeah.
that?
They took the 10 million from our RDA, and we had to loan it to, the general fund had to loan 10 million to the RDA, and then when the RDA, they took the 10 million again.
Yeah,
But-
those are the ERAF
Yeah.
shifts.
Right.
Oh, yeah,
That's
you
what it
were,
was.
all right.
ERAF. That was another.
That's another
Right.
whole ballgame, yes, alrighty.
Donation to the state.
They took that twice.
With redevelopment gone and tax increment gone, I don't see that as being.
Okay, yep,
a
I got it,
concern.
all right. I just somehow thought that was on the triple flip, but again, they could do a quadruple flip on us, I
Yeah.
guess, if they wanted to, who knows?
There was a part of the triple flip that I think it took place, it was kind of a deal that the cities struck with the governor, that he, if we agreed to loan money, and if, I think La Quinta probably did what a lot of cities did, we sold our receivable and got the money up front because we were afraid we wouldn't get paid back, but that was separate from any RDA type things. I think that's what you're thinking about, which was part of the whole budget deal.
As far as the recommendations here, I don't see a necessity for a reserve for federal, state, county takeaways. We couldn't put enough in there to cover what they might do anyway, and that money can be earmarked and spent for something else. And the reserve for economic stabilization, I'm kind of with you, Lee. I'd like to, on these, the cash flow, all of these actually have a larger, or another discussion when Frank is here. No offense. I heartily appreciate the time that our IAB spent getting these together. The numbers, the recommended 10% for reserve cash flow, I have no problem with that. For emergencies, up to 40%, that's fine. I would like to see us, and this is what we're going to do, define our reserve policy. And that's the old one that we have, which, 35% of our expenses, our budgeted expenses, plus 4 million. This
That's
seems,
right.
yeah, that's what it currently is, but I think we do need to take another hard look at it, which is what we're doing.
Right.
But I'd like to see this come back again, of course, which it will, I guess it's a study session.
Right.
All right. Hey, Robert.
Yeah, a couple of things. First and foremost, thanks to the work of the Investment Advisory Board, we have the platform to have this conversation. And that's remarkable that you brought us here. Thank you so very much for your work. I have some feeling about segregating funds that may be difficult to then switch around, but I do understand that there are some expenses that we are going to have no matter what, and we can start forecasting for those. Our infrastructures will need funds, and we can start putting money aside. I would like to ask our city attorney, is that correct what Councilmember Peña said, that if we had spent the $6 million, they couldn't have taken it?
If we had.
Is that
spent
correct?
Well, it
Or
depends
we
how
lost
it was
it.
encumbered. If it had been encumbered by
We
a
should have
private
encumbered.
party.
So put it in escrow account, for example.
Or contractually, somehow have it obligated.
With a private party, because legally, and I'll try not to get too legal.
No, I
here,
understand.
There is the constitutional protection of impairment of contracts that does apply for private parties. Unfortunately, the state can constitutionally impair the obligations of its political subdivisions, such as an agreement between the redevelopment agency and the city. And they know that. So that's why I think when you were mentioning, Councilmember Peña, the idea of having a contractual obligation in place with a third party that then is obligated to receive that funding, that nothing's absolute with the impairment of contracts protection, but it is a higher standard of protection than just a political subdivision.
And if we were to have a reserve in escrow accounts, can those funds be invested, or can they're
No,
frozen in the escrow?
investments, and we would have to
I'm
be
asking.
careful. If we were to go down that road, we'd have to be very careful, because you can't go against public policy on what public funds may be used for. And the other thing to always keep in mind is that one council, they can make contractual decisions, but what they cannot do is forever bind a future council with money that may come in the future, so.
Well, again, we know that we're going to have an increasing cost. The question I had this morning about unassigned really sounds bad, and those funds are there. They can be appropriated to take care of our needs, the needs of our city, the needs of our infrastructures. I think that if we can protect ourselves, we definitely need to look into having some sort of these accounts to protect these self-generated revenues that are being saved for the use in our city. So that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. One more?
Question for our city attorney again. There was some legislative rumbles about cities not being able to go out for contract services. Has that gone any further in the legislature?
I'm not aware of anything currently being discussed in the legislature. Is it in particular with any type of contract or service?
Well, no, it was, they started with a resolution with respect to the fact that cities could not, did it have to do with, no, it could not, we had to, as a city, everyone had to be an employee.
Oh, an employee.
We couldn't do the contract
versus
services
independent
thing.
contractor.
Right.
Yeah, as far as I know, there isn't any proposal, at least I haven't heard of anything. That's not to say there may not be a bill that comes at some point during the session, but.
That's just, that bothers me because it's out there and they know about it and they could certainly do it because they don't think about what's going on in the city. So when we're looking at this again, we need to be mindful of that flaw that's out there also. Okay, I'm done.
A couple things. Rita, if you could go back on the slides, you requested recommendations on an appropriation for the insurance payment, community development getting an extra 80,000 or temp staff, and there was a third, just general fund. Okay.
Right.
Of course.
Amend the revenue
So the question
budget.
on the insurance premium, is that similar to the police payment that always is that one time that ends up, is this timing issue a recurring issue?
No, with our property liability, that insurance, they were part of a pool, and they'll do a retrospective adjustment periodically and adjust you either up or down. Sometimes we get a credit, but this year we got a ding. And right, so we had the money budgeted, and but we paid the bill in July, and we thought, since it was retrospective, we could pay it out of 13-14, but really the proper way was to pay it actually in 14-15 when we paid the bill. So we just want to, we set that money aside in 13-14, it's designated in the reserve, and we just want to appropriate it, so now we can pay it in 14-15.
Okay, well, we need to do that.
Yes.
I mean, I'm comfortable with the proposed recommended budget adjustments going forward as far as direction and coming back to us on that. Thank you. Going back to then the reserve policy, again, I echo the council members' comments on the work that the IAB did, because we tasked you to deliver something to us, and you did. So it's a great discussion. I guess the question for me would be, I'm very comfortable in looking at the reserves going up to the 60% recommended amount, because while we're seeing a little blip, it's always better to save and have that on hand. You know, we are a conservative council and have practiced that way, and even though we can't predict what the state's going to do, we still have our own city that we need to manage and budget for, which is what we've been doing. So I like that recommendation. The question on cash flow reserve going up to 10%, I like that as well. Is there an option to change the definition for emergencies? Or is that something we can do, or is that given to us?
Well, and Rita, please correct me if I'm wrong, if I misstate what was in your report, but emergencies typically mean natural disaster, which is where, at least for purposes of reporting under the CAFR, that's my understanding.
So, and where have we used Where have we spent money in this over the past 10 years?
I'd have to get back to you on that. I'm not aware of you ever tapping into that, so I'd have to check on that for you, but I'll report back to you. And
So in the So the reason why I ask that is, I don't want to save that much money for a natural disaster if we can't access it because the definition is so strict that we can't get to it. And if we haven't used it, considering what we've gone through with the last couple flood areas, that could be a perfect avenue to start for some of our storm drain, flood control revisions down the road from a CIP standpoint. So I don't support, I don't support increasing that. I would support revisiting those allocations and maybe not loading up that line item, that category as hefty as it's been.
Yeah, and just to premise that, there may be some sort of limits that cities must have. I'm just not aware of what they are, but understood the policy behind it.
We've always been criticized for having too much.
Right.
So let's take a look at that if we could.
Sure, and I think the IAB was, because of the recent storms and those kind of things, they were very aware of that. I don't think we can change the definition of emergency from what the code says. However, we could create an account that incorporates all those things in it and call it something different for the purposes of our policy. So we just wouldn't refer to the definition of emergency in the code. We'd create our definition in our policy and call it something, and you could collapse some of those categories if that's what you wanted to.
Okay, because we've got a lot of money in there. I mean, on the economic stabilization proposal, I guess I would expand that to economic development and/or stabilization. So not just to fill the gap, but have that for growth opportunities in some capacity or some project that might come before us. I'm not in favor of the takeaway category. I'd move that 1% over to the economic development / stabilization / we've got to get CIP funds moving in here too. So if there's an option of doing something with that emergency category where we keep it, but create one that's CIP specific, I just, as Chrissy said, on the takeaway, there's no way we're ever going to have enough to predict what they're going to take next. So we have to work in that reserve, that component. And I guess overall, I shared this with Lee, a concept that was sent to me on community involvement in, and maybe this applies to reserves, maybe as we get into the budget discussion, called a participatory budget. And it's an allocation that the city council would make that puts an X amount of dollars based on what we can afford into a budget of sorts that we allow the community to submit projects and/or the community to vote on what they want to do with that money. Pros and cons, there's some European cities and some United States cities that have been looking at this concept that provide some input in terms of getting the community involved, whether it's a North La Quinta project with landscaping or an art piece in a different category that's not art in public places, things that we wouldn't already have allocations for or grant funds for, but similar to our grant budget that we have to determine based on nonprofit donations, it's almost a mini slush fund, so to speak, that allows our residents to say, this is what's important to us, whether it be a specific development, a specific homeowners association, whatever community. And I guess during our process of getting mid-year and then proposed budgets, kick that around as a potential idea for staff to consider and maybe propose to start with a some kind of amount. Or not, yes, or not. But
in the budget discussions, so we can.
Yes, yeah, I don't think it would be a reserve issue though, but I'm throwing it out there as we're potentially reallocating these things. It's an interesting concept, I mean, and we're about thinking outside the box. So it's not something that's being done right now, I don't think, in our community. So I guess recommendations-wise, we're saying that we're comfortable with what they've proposed on these. We just need to give them direction on the go-forward plan.
And if I could bring back this whole aspect on our underfunded pension liability. I mean, that's a real liability out there, and at some point, we're going to have to step up to that. And I would hate to have it become an emergency issue, and all of a sudden, all right, you got to come up with $7 million per se. And that might be one of those issues that Sacramento says, look, we can't afford the pension, so you have to pay it for us. That they come up with, all right, we need 5, 10, whatever, for this, whether it be for our own city or for Sacramento. Hopefully, hopefully, we have control of those monies for our community and not sending it up to Sacramento. But I just would like to ask that we think about the whole pension aspect and the underfunded pension liability that's looming out there, that we address the issue and we try to get our hands around it to some extent as much as we can. But if I can, Madam Mayor, one other question. Thank you. In regards to the recommendations and the $80,000
That's here.
for the, right, for the community development. Last year at this time, we put money into the community development out of the mid-year review. And then at budget time, we put additional money into the community service department as well. So this is a,
Better come back, you
is
better
this
come up with
another,
us.
I mean, now correct me if I'm wrong, please, Les, did we do this last year at mid-year review?
We did, and
Did we, and we did it at budget time again? You increased
somewhat.
your
I mean,
staff?
we increased it over the previous year's budget without the mid-year increase, but activity continues to increase. So we're responding to the fact that our workload continues to increase, and our plan check services, inspection services continue to be a cost that we are absorbing through primarily temporary help and other contract services. So rather than adding staff, we're using that and we adjust accordingly. Like, for example, plan check services dropped off a little bit right after the first of the year, and one of our contract plan checkers, we are no longer using him right now. If it changes around again, we'll ask if he can come back and help us again. And so we're adjusting accordingly. So we're watching that very carefully. I meet with the building official every week. We talk about what's happening in that area, and we're only utilizing those resources as needed.
And it looked like plan check fees are up substantially, and that kind of covers
Yes.
these costs.
Yeah, we're
that
estimating,
we're looking to increase.
we're asking for 80, we're estimating about 160 over budget in revenue coming in, asking for about half of that to cover expenses.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Good sign.
Shoot, there's one other item. Okay, all right, that's all I have to know.
Closing comments for staff?
Well, just to the point Councilmember Osborne made, whatever we can quantify, a pension is something that we can quantify. We definitely have to look at it, and we definitely have to start setting these funds aside. My concern remains in not having too many categories that then will take a tremendous amount of effort to move the money around or to change the policy and tie our hands or future council's hands too much. But definitely, to your point, Lee, whatever we can quantify, we should get on it. And if we can segregate these funds and get the state out of the honey jar, so much for the better.
Right.
One last question then on the reserves. We've got $16.5 million in reserves for emergencies, which apparently we've never tapped and don't have a natural disaster foreseen, although we thought we might have had a couple, that we can access. What would it take to reallocate that into a different fund? Is that something that we can, even though we've been practicing the 35% plus 4 million, can we just make that appropriation?
Well, if, right now, that policy's set by the budget resolution, so you could change, when you change the policy, you can change how you want to use that. I think if you were, during the year, if we still had our existing policy and you wanted to use that for something else, and the city attorney can correct me if I'm wrong, it's not in the code, so you could by resolution say, we've changed what this is for, and you could, I mean, in reality, you can always tap into it. You just have to change the policy.
And that's correct. If it would have to come back
Right.
as an
Okay.
agendized item before the council, but.
I think that's an area we should look at,
So you could
have that
what,
flexibility.
14 million in that account, so.
Right. So, okay, do you have what you need?
I just wanted to clarify one thing and add two comments. One to the point that pretty much you all made about the need for capital improvements and those kind of things. And I talked with some of you about that should be kind of an ongoing thing. Maybe we don't have, as Councilman Osborne said, the total amount, but every year we have a target and we're going to budget a contribution to reach that target. So you don't have to look at it as that we have to have all of it to do it now or we can't do it. We can say this is our target and we're going to keep every year filling for that. And then the question I have for you is, if I hear you right, you'd like us to bring this back when the city manager's here because it is such a big topic. It really warrants its own study session and further discussion. So no decisions at this time, just additional conversation.
Well, it's a study anyway, so we're not approving
Right.
anything, but
I'm just talking about when she brings it back. Do you want it back as a study session or business?
Like a study session.
I say business.
I mean, one of the things also is, within everything we're talking about here, we need a lot more reserves than we have. I mean, there's a substantial amount of reserves we don't have. And that's one of the things, we're going to go to the people of La Quinta here and talk about a sales tax increase. We've got to be able to explain to the people of La Quinta, if we're going to go for a sales tax increase, we've got to explain why. And these are some of the issues, or these are the issues why. Because we don't have enough what we need for a capital budget and some of these other matters. So with that in mind, we need to understand what we need and what we don't have.
When's the next IAB meeting?
This month, it's canceled, so it will be in March. It was canceled because the joint meeting is on the same day.
So Jennifer, are you comfortable? I don't know if you feel like you would need to reconvene your group based on our feedback or work with Rita on perhaps another study session?
I think they've done their work, if I could interrupt. And I think now it's in your arena. They've made their benchmark recommendation, and now it really is at, your priorities in getting kind of battling it out with all of you and getting your, boiling it down.
Well, I'm comfortable with coming back as a business item, but if you want to have a further discussion, I'm happy to do another study.
Well, we don't know what we're going to have in the business item. We don't know what the proposal's going to be.
Well, they're taking our direction based on our feedback and.
But did we give you enough feedback to say, okay, this is what we want, put it in a business item?
I'm hearing a lot of different things from a lot of different people, so I would have to say no.
Bring it back to the study.
We heard a lot of good ideas, but I think you need further discussion about
Yes.
some of these individual segments you talked about tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you very much. Concludes. No, there's no rush. That concludes the study session, and I'd like to deviate from the agenda to do our public hearing while the folks
You're
are,
having so much fun back there.
since we've got folks here in the room. Do you want to come up? We have one public hearing item tonight, and that's the adopt resolutions to approve a site development permit and tentative tract map to allow the development of 48 single-family homes at Andalusia, east of Madison Street and south of Avenue 58. We'll start with staff report.
Okay. Which one? Thank you, Honor Council. Try and get down the dual fix here. This evening, we're here to discuss the village at Andalusia. This site map here represents the Andalusia property. As you can see, the subject property is right in the heart of Andalusia, immediately to the east of the clubhouse area. If you've maybe possibly been out there or have heard recently, the temporary clubhouse facility has served its purpose there quite well, continues to operate. They have a new clubhouse under construction. And actually just recently in front of the Planning Commission, there was the approval of their new spa, which is will be under construction at some time in the near future. But it's the central part, if you will, the heart of Andalusia, where a lot of that activity has occurred. Andalusia was originally approved in 2003. They have been building in phases. There are about 170 homes into construction of this portion of Andalusia east of Madison, with quite a few additional units remaining to go here. Most of the residential development built to date has been a part of the original tract map serving the project, and this project that's before you will result in a clustered unit configuration immediately east of the clubhouse complex. And there are other projects actually in our community that have a similar situation. You probably have maybe seen out at Hideaway, there are some more intensified clustered units. Madison Club even has their very high-end villa units. We have condominiums at Mountain View, et cetera, et cetera. So what NLC is proposing here is very much in alignment with what we have seen in a few of our other gated golf course-oriented communities. Oops. I'm going all over here. This is quite an experience having to do both at the same time here. I'm going to try to pat my head and chew gum too. Here we go. So there are 48 single-family homes proposed on 15, just under 16 acres. There are 3 floor plans. 2 of those floor plans have a second-story element, smaller second-story element to them. And they range between approximately 2,700 and 3,200 square feet. And they're going to, they are proposed to have the same architectural style, that Spanish architectural style that exists out there right now with the community units as well as the existing single-family homes. The project is consistent with the specific plan governing this property, and the homes as they're proposed are very much in line with the quality of construction and design of those that already exist. And this project's very exciting from the standpoint is it's really focused and oriented to be complementary to and heavily using the clubhouse facility, their tennis complex, their pool area. I mentioned the spa facility coming here in the near future. It'll have the ability to have a walking connection, so the idea of that nexus and activity is a strong focus with this proposed development. The landscaping that is proposed for this segment is also consistent with the rest of the Andalusia development in its landscape palette. And the track map complies with all of our requirements as well as state law. Here you have the visual representation of the site plan and landscaping. The units are for the most part clustered in 2 and 3 unit pods with one driveway serving 2 units and then a separate driveway serving 1. And about midway down, there you can see some heavier trees, if you will, identified, and that will be a pathway linkage running into the tennis court area that will lead up to the backside of the clubhouse facilities. And all of the units there to the east and south will back up to hole 10, and I can't remember the other hole number there, of the Andalusia golf course. And then on the west end, they'll back up to the existing tennis facilities. Here you get a general representation of the elevations as proposed, both in architecture and in general color palette. And here we have a floor plan. And the tentative track map, again, it's a standard private street serving the project consistent with what's existing within Andalusia in the driveway connections. There'll also be some pockets of parking existing in a few areas too as well. And the Planning Commission considered this item at their January 13th meeting, and after deliberation and discussion and conducting a hearing, they've unanimously recommended City Council approval of what's before you this evening. So with that, staff is recommending adoption of resolution representing the site development permit as well as a resolution approving the tentative track map and associated conditions of approval for both. And with that, this concludes my staff report, and be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Great, thank you, Les. Questions for staff? No? Lee?
Les, regarding off-site improvements, has all the landscaping been done along Avenue 60 or Monroe or Madison?
Not on Avenue 60. The vast majority of Madison is done, about 2/3 of Madison as you come from north to south, and all of Monroe is done. But the portion of Avenue 60 that is unfinished right now is actually a part of Phase 4 of the Andalusia project. There is there's a large lot map, but the actual mapping of the individual lots for that development is yet to come, and the conditions associated with the perimeter would be associated with that map. Andalusia has gone in advance of being required for certain improvements. They have put a perimeter wall in. A lot of that was done due to concerns raised by Trilogy over dust control. That was done about a year ago, I believe. And that, again, that was not a requirement of the cities at that time. They went ahead and did that in advance. And they've also done the majority of the street improvements on Avenue 60. I think there's a small segment still remaining that they are talking with Tim about and completing that here in the near term. But the landscaping itself is still unfinished for a good portion of Avenue 60.
So are there any extensions that are laying out there that we've given for any of these improvements?
No, that would, the actual condition of approval associated with the landscaping would come with the future map adjacent to that segment of Andalusia, which, again, there's a large lot map, but they have not done the individual mapping for the future lots in that area of the development.
Okay, because I know we went to Madison Club and we asked them to finish the landscaping, and I don't know if that was because we had the means to do so within their requirements.
Yes, we did.
But we don't have the means to do so here on Avenue 60.
That is correct. Madison Club was fully mapped out, and those were subdivision improvement requirements that were fulfilled later on. There were some extensions granted for Madison Club. In this instance, the outstanding landscaping would be, again, associated with a future mapping of that area of the property.
Okay, thank you.
And then did they share with you the concept or idea of why they wanted to change this format, besides the general economic changes?
Well, I know Mr. Sparks is in the audience. He could probably address that, but this isn't really much of a change or a departure from what was actually identified in these specific plans. So this is consistent with the specific plan. There has been, I believe, since 2002, 2003, an idea of a more intensified clustering of homes in proximity to the clubhouse.
Okay. Any other questions for Les? Sure.
The parking pockets that you talked about, where
Yes.
would they be?
Oh, the shared driveway and parking.
I don't know if you can see on, I had to do both of these, so there are small little areas. I think there are 4 parking spaces, 4 and 5 parking spaces. I think there's actually one of 2 that come off perpendicular to the private drive as it runs east-west in the map there, within the exhibit on the.
They kind of look like pumpkin teeth.
Yeah, they look like little teeth
the road.
popping
Yeah.
out.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So
Pumpkin teeth, that did it
it's-
for me.
Thank
It's
you.
sporadic throughout, so there's, small little areas for guests to park and whatnot, because there's no parking on the driveways because of the,
Right.
communal drive situation.
Okay. And I'm sure they meet all the qualifications for, any other, like, emergency vehicles or
Egress.
roads running through or whatever.
Yes, this has all been reviewed by our
Okay.
fire department and has been given their approval, their acceptance.
Okay,
Perfect.
thank you.
Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing, and I would like to request the developer come up first. That would be Nolan Sparks. Request to speak has been completed anyway. Welcome back.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Appreciate y'all considering this tonight. We've been real fortunate to have great support with staff and working us through this process, but as they pointed out, this was an intent to have a little bit more intensified area around our club, just like we did at Rancho La Quinta. It's actually fewer units that we're going to, because what we hope we perceive the market doing, everybody wants it to be a little bit nicer. We expect this to be pretty much a lock and leave product for the Newport Beach, Orange County area. They want to get away from the hustle and bustle there and come out here. They would be responsible for the home. The HOA would take care of everything outside. You were asking about the parking. We're really trying to create a campus complex there where you come in one place, you park your car, you're on your foot, you're on your feet, you're on your bicycle, you're in your golf cart. That's what most of our residents do. And I don't think it showed up on that whole picture list, but we've got this plaza area between the existing racket club and fitness facility and the new golf club house coming up, that hopefully that's where people would come, valet their cars, and they're right there central to wherever they're going to go. For these people in the village product, like Les pointed out, there's 2 avenues to walk right down to the tennis courts and then up to the club facilities, fitness, bocce, whatever it may be. We've had several focus groups. We're going to implement the stone veneer elevation. Has gotten very popular with the houses we have going on right now. A little bit more brick elements, though still the stucco and ceramic tile is popular. So we have the 3 elevations. We generally are able to afford the purchasers the opportunity to select what they would like, and we'll be able to do the same thing here. So it breaks up the street scene a little bit. So right now, I know our sales team's very excited about it, and they just want to know why I'm so far behind. I told them it's because I was waiting on them to decide exactly what they wanted.
So how convenient is it for the trash to come out? Now that we're sharing a driveway.
It's easy enough. We worked through all of that. I can't see well enough to see it on the floor plans, but it's what we will do. We actually will contract, the HOA will contract with Burtech to go behind the wall and get it. So the residents don't have to worry about it. Burtech will.
Okay.
Frank will do it personally.
I want pictures of that.
In cufflinks.
The parking that I was actually referring to would be guest parking.
Right.
Party or something like that.
Yeah, and there's a little bit of that. And of course, the club's right there where they can park. I think pretty much in any country club community around here, that's always the issue if someone has a big event. We have a on-site property manager with their HOA. He's great in helping coordinate home if they're going to have something, let neighbors know, and he would do the same thing in this development. But that's a great question.
Other questions? Robert?
I just have some question about what is the projected price for these homes, and who is your client?
And who's my what?
Your client. Who's going to buy these homes?
Yes, sir. Right now, we're hoping to be able to start them in the 800s, but if sales keeps adding what they want to it, I don't know that I can bring them in there. So, and then they would top out about 1.1 million. There are some that look, due south across that whole 12 and across water, and some that look back northwest toward Point Happy. None of the views are bad. The Chocolate Mountains and looking back to the northeast are beautiful too, especially when the sun's setting. But they'll be priced accordingly. But to not compete with our smaller homes that are in construction right now, we're trying to keep them down around $1 million. If I can get sales to let me change some of their selections, then maybe I can do that. Most of our buyers are pretty much from the Northwest and the Orange County, LA County, and a lot of activity from the Newport Beach area, which I find really interesting. But what they say, even when they're relaxing, there's so much hustle and bustle. When they get out to La Quinta, it's so much more relaxed. It's worth the drive to get out of that to relax out here. And so that's what sales is telling us, from where that'll be where they heavily market these things. This similar product was extremely successful for us at Rancho La Quinta, 13 years ago now. Yeah. So I've been sitting down there a while. So.
Very good. Lee?
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Well, you guys do a phenomenal job. Your Rancho La Quinta and this are beautiful projects, and you do, top quality projects. What is your time frame, again, my question earlier regarding landscaping on Avenue 60?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I would say the best case scenario, it's 3 years away, and worst case scenario, based on our projected sales, is 5 years away. Because we will need, if our sales keep going the way we hope they're going to, we'll need to get in here, get all that mapped, get it engineered, and certainly then it makes sense for us to put it in. As for a business plan for us right now, we have it, and not to pat myself on the back, but exactly like Les said, we have done everything we're required to do, and then some more anytime we've been requested of it. I think Tim and Les were kind enough to arrange a meeting with several different groups from Trilogy to sit down so they know who I was. They can call me if they've got issues. I'm not hiding from anybody. I'll do what I can if I can. And again, if it makes business sense for us, we're more than happy to do it. If it doesn't, we're more than happy to explain why it doesn't. And certainly I can understand they'd love to have it in. And there is the that fourth lane, Tim, we will be getting going on that soon. Well, but unfortunately, just part of it, what occurred, Trilogy got there before us. We had a joint development agreement with them. So they put in what's in on Avenue 60, okay? Tim's staff just discovered recently that one lane is not as wide as it's supposed to be by about, I don't know, 1.5 feet as you get toward Madison. Now, it's our responsibility because we paid Trilogy back for that, for our part of that road. So that's been brought to light. We're working on getting the engineering done, but we thought scabbing on 1.5 feet of paving, that's not going to work. So we are going to put in that, the north side lane, the north would be what? Westbound lane, right, for about 1,500 feet back to a storm drain, so drainage is not an issue. Okay. Now, I know it's not the landscape, and it's probably not what my neighbors want to hear, but that's what's coming up next. But as sales volume increases and we start moving toward we built this property clockwise, northwest, northeast, then we're going southeast, southwest. That was the plan all along, and then to go across the street. That's where we are.
Okay, thank you.
Well, that second lane's a big deal for them as well because of the bike lane component. So it's the existing north lane that's got some width discrepancies?
Right, and that was what came out of the discussion with Trilogy. I think you were involved last time you met with them down there, and so we're, Nolan's addressing that as quickly as he can.
Very good, thank you. John, any questions? No. Okay, thank you, Nolan.
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
Thank you.
We don't have any other requests to speak on this matter, so at this point I will close the public hearing and the matters before the council.
I move adoption of a resolution approving site development permit number 2013-928, subject to the attached findings and conditions of approval.
Second.
There's a motion and a second on the floor. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, that concludes our public hearing.
How about the second one? I think
Go
we have
ahead.
to do that one, don't we?
Yes.
I move adoption of a resolution approving tentative track map 36524, subject to the attached findings and conditions of approval.
Second.
Motion and second. Please vote.
Okay.
Tentative track map passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, with that concludes our public hearing. And before we move on to the business session, we've had a couple people that are been patient. We have a random request to speak, so I'm going to bring up Jennifer Carlson. But you can prep for the business section. This will be short. If you're next.
I really appreciate you guys allowing me to randomly speak in front of you this evening. My name is Jennifer Carlson, and I am from the organization Up With People. As some of you may know, Up With People is returning to Coachella Valley this March. And for those of you who are unaware of who our organization is, we are a global education, community service, and performance-based organization. And we are 100 participants representing 20 different countries, and we travel the world for 6 months. We stay in a community for 1 week with local host families, doing community service around the area, and then also performing a benefit concert. So we are coming to the Coachella Valley and to La Quinta, March 16 through 23, and we will be raising money for the Ophelia Project, which is a mentoring organization in the Valley in all 3 school districts. It's for young girls, and it's a really successful and wonderful nonprofit here in your community. So we are looking to raise money for them during our benefit concerts on March 20th and 21st. And we'll be performing at Indio High School in their new gymnasium and also at Palm Springs High School. And so we are looking for members of the council, Mayor Evans, and also members of the La Quinta community to support our visit here and to get involved so that we can raise as much money as for the Ophelia Project as possible. And also we are looking for host families for our 110 international participants who are coming March 16th through the 23rd. So if anyone is interested in participating in that way, you can go to upwithpeople.org/hostfamilies. And you can also purchase tickets to our shows to support the Ophelia Project at upwithpeople.org. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Excellent. Okay, let's move on to business session item number 1, receive and file comprehensive annual financial report for the year ended June June 30th, 2014. This is where it's great to have a CPA on the council.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We analyzed a lot of the information in the CAFR and the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report in my lengthy study session, so I won't go through all of it. Just a few points. We're required by law to produce this document and submit it to the state, and the information, as I discussed, has to be presented in a specific way, government-wide, showing all our long-term liabilities, our assets. It serves a different purpose. So we kind of covered that. The other part of this is the audit. We're required by law to have an independent audit. And then also along with the audit, the auditors do a management evaluation and identify areas of concern. So with regard to the audit, we received an unmodified opinion, which is the most favorable opinion you can get. So there's no problems in that area. Our independent auditors are Lance, Soul, and Lunghard. I always have a hard time saying that. And Brian Gruber, CPA partner, is here in the audience should you have any questions about the CAFR or the audit. The other part that I mentioned is the management review of concerns. And one of the concerns that came as no surprise is it can be boiled down to that they came out to do their field work and nothing was ready. There's been a changeover, as you know, in top management in the finance department, and from December of 2013 until May, when new finance director came on board, I think there was a vacuum of some of the things that need to be done in finance, and couple that with a major financial conversion in the middle of the year. So we were essentially running two financial systems, which required a lot of mapping of old account numbers onto new, because we revamped the chart of accounts too. Put those things together, and we had a perfect storm, and the auditors did encounter difficulties in getting the information they needed from us when they were out here, and resulted in a delay in the preparation of the CAFR. But we are back on track now, and they were extremely patient with us. I was afraid they would fire us, but I don't think they can do that. So with that, the request is to receive and file a report, but if you have any questions, we can go over those, or Mr. Gruber's here also to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Any questions for you? Questions? I know Lee has some, so we'll go through the rest of us first. Go ahead, Robert.
My question has to do with having identified some of these issues. I'm on page 79 here. It says the finance department will be bringing forth a staffing reorganization plan to address these issues. And my only question is about the timeline. When can we expect that to happen?
My hope is to bring that forward as part of the budget process, which really isn't that far off. We have some temporary accounting staff helping us at the moment, but what I've observed in my time here is that there's been a reliance on the auditors to do some of our work, and they really need to maintain their independence, and we need to have some more professional level positions in the department, and maybe now with new financial systems in place and other efficiencies, not as much clerical. So there's a trade-off there. So those are the kind of things you'll see as we bring a reorganization forward as part of the budget process.
And going into the next audit, because of some of these issues, are we going to expect some similar issues to resurface due to the transfer from one software to another? Should we be okay?
We should be okay unless somebody decides to play a joke on me and have us switch to another system.
No. Okay.
So, no, to answer your question, we've resolved most of those issues. We've gotten through a lot of the transition and worked out the bugs, and it's just the nature of the beast, and you shouldn't have to hear about that next year.
Thank you.
Kristen.
Yes, on page 91, under the future, the end of that first paragraph, it says the city would invest up to $27 million in redevelopment agency bond proceeds. What is that?
Are you looking, I think my numbering's not the same as yours. Are you looking at the CAFR?
You know what, it's regarding the Silver Rock development, so that would be our
Yeah. Yeah, what was
7
this?
million plus the 7 million bonds we have,
Yeah.
plus the tax rebate.
Well, okay, no, that's not what it says, though. It says up to $27 million in redevelopment agency bond proceeds and TOT.
Right.
So I want to know what that $27 million in bond proceeds.
I believe some of that is bond proceeds that were expended in the past for land acquisition and those kind of things. So it was kind of a cumulative number, not.
Well, when it says the future.
Yeah, I think the future focused more, duly noted, I think the future was about what we can hope that development will bring to us.
Okay, all right, I'll go with that. Okay, and then this has appeared in the past, and it's appearing again. I'm on page 106 under business type activities. And they're talking about the outstanding advance due the general fund from the inception of the golf course opening is $5,326,000. It's this sentence that bothers me. It is anticipated that these advances will be repaid from future income from Silver Rock activities such as TOT, sales tax, and golf course net income generated on the site. Didn't we have some discussion about getting rid of that sentence?
Okay, are you on 106?
Yep, the very bottom.
106.
Because, that's a question for
Well,
you.
I think when the advances were set up, an advance implies that there's going to be repayment. So at some point, if the council chooses to handle that in a different way, we'd have to take some kind of formal action. But because it is an advance, it's implied that there's going to be repayment. And I think when the advances were set up, it was hoped that those future revenues would help pay that.
Yeah, but what you're saying is absolutely true.
Right.
This particular sentence comes back to bite us quite frequently. Like, well, when is the golf course going to make money? Well, and then to explain why that's really not going to happen. And if it's not going to happen, then I would like on some future agenda for this little sentence to be taken out, if it's not going to happen.
Well, we'd have to change it and not have it as an advance anymore, because either it's an advance and future repayment is planned, or if it's not an advance, I mean, we can take out from what revenue sources it will come from, if that's what you're meaning, but either, if we call it an advance, the assumption is we're going to be repaid.
That's true.
So.
But we're not going to be. According to our budget discussion last year, we're not.
No, and I understand what you're saying, and
So
that would.
people keep asking.
Right, that would require an action on the council's part to make some kind of action to remove that.
Okay. We have also, I'm on page 109. There's a $7.1 million advance from the general fund that was outstanding at 2013-14.
Top paragraph.
Yeah, it's under Civic Center Fund. And I assume this is on a schedule for payback?
Yes, it is.
And how is it paid? What revenues do we get? Pay this back? What category does it come out of?
There's the payback to the general fund, I believe, comes from the Civic Center DIF fund. And as the revenues are accumulated in the Civic Center DIF fund, those revenues go towards paying back the general fund.
Okay. So that'll be a slow process, basically.
Yes.
So it'll be done in 18-19.
Okay.
Right.
So we've got a
But development's picking up and DIF fees are picking up.
million a year.
Okay. Oh, I already answered that one, sorry.
It's okay.
So, I know there's a reason for this, I just don't quite understand it, but on page 130, I'm under summary of significant accounting policies. A reporting entity, and then the second to last paragraph talks about the financing authority, and it says separate financial statements are not prepared for the financing authority nor the housing authority.
Right.
And why is that? Because of
They're-
what?
I don't know if I'm using the right terminology, but they're considered component units of the city, so they're incorporated into these statements.
Okay, all right. Let's see, I'm almost finished.
That's okay.
Be patient.
I'm glad.
Aren't you proud?
Yeah.
Get out. Okay.
What page?
Oh, I'm on 148. Changes in long-term liabilities under loans, Washington Street Apartments. In terms of the revenue that we receive from the tenants there, do you have any idea what that is on a monthly basis? I know they're subsidized too, but just to make this statement.
I would have to get back to you on that. I'm
Okay.
sorry, I don't know, but I'll find that out for you.
Okay. All right. Okay, then on page 150, it says debt without governmental commitment. This is note number 10. It says the city of La Quinta sold improvement bonds issued pursuant to the blah, blah, blah Act of 1915. And the bonds are payable from the annual installments collected on the regular property tax bills. And I know that I know what we're doing. We're collecting it and then giving it out. Is that a Mello-Roos?
No, I don't think it's a Mello-Roos. It's a community
The
facility.
Improvement Act is a separate
Right.
authorizing statute
Okay.
for assessment.
Right. Thank you.
And so when we're acting as the agent, in essence here, do we get paid for this? Or just, I mean, I just wonder.
No, you don't, I mean, you can recoup costs for administration, but.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
Okay. That,
We
yes,
could,
you should.
but we
be-
don't. Or we didn't. We don't know. Doesn't matter. Okay.
You know, on the Improvement Act, I'd have to double check that. For CFDs, you can. For the Improvement Act, I'd have to double check.
Okay.
Just note that that might be an opportunity.
Yeah, revenue opportunity. Okay. Okay, and then this is just where this golf course thing appears again. It's under notes. It's under note 11. B. It says the advances, the general fund advanced the golf course fund 5 million plus. The advances accrue interest at city's investment pool rate, okay, and are to be repaid by the golf course out of future profits. Is that another statement that's just like the other statement, where it's really not going to
Yes.
happen?
Yes, it just doesn't give us
Right.
other options.
And I think what I'm dancing around saying is that if we were going to treat it as something else than an advance, we can't just change it in the CAFR, but
Yeah,
the
yeah.
council could make that decision.
Okay, but that's basically the same thing.
Okay.
And then on page 258, 59, when you're talking about the audit. Our city manager keeps us pretty much up to date with what's going on in the finance department. And you've done a yeoman's job.
Yes.
I know what you've done a yeoman's job.
Well, thank
Just
you.
to-
Thank you.
So I appreciate all of your hard work. There were going to be some things that had to be done, obviously, and you can't do them overnight. When you have a system that's outdated, and then you're putting a new system in, and new people are coming in, and so I just wanted to say thank you very much. Good job. Sorry. Hold on. More questions?
No.
I covered everything.
Well, Chrissy, these are really, really good questions, and because these advance issues are just kind of hanging out there. And one of the issues regarding these advances is, are we paying interest on these advances? Because that's part of the problem, got us in trouble on that $6 million we talked
Exactly,
earlier.
yeah.
We weren't paying anything, and we were just kind of accruing it. And then in 2006, we changed all that, and we started actually paying these things. So that $6 million could have been a lot worse if we didn't actually start making payments of this interest. And I think it's something we need to look at on these advances too. But I think us here need to look at those advances, see maybe we need to reclassify these as just strictly investments.
Okay.
again, any interest, maybe we leave the interest out there that hasn't been paid, so we can at least pay the interest. I don't know if that's been accrued. I believe it's been accrued.
It has.
Okay.
And some of the advances are paying interest, like between the diffs.
Okay.
And then others are just being accrued.
Okay. And then, as she said too, I think you guys, you really have done well with all the changes in the accounting department. And some of us that knew John Faulkner and his mindset, years ago to where we are today, and the challenges you've had and some staff issues, I think you've really done a good job.
Thank you.
And I can appreciate our auditors and the work that they had to do to get this done. So I think it's you guys have done well, given the challenges you've had to deal with.
So now that we know she can do miracles.
That's right. That's right. She can do it. I mean, a number of the questions that I had on this report, I've already asked when we skipped over to the study session. And some of these things, well, one of the, we talked about some of these costs and the variances and the expenditures for over appropriations, but you're going to change how that's done so it doesn't look like,
yes,
engineering's over $300,000 in the budget.
Right.
I mean, as a whole, I think the city did a phenomenal job in controlling our costs.
Yes.
And so hats off to the whole team in controlling their costs and coming in under budget from the expense side. And so I think it's a great job. One of the things I look forward to in the future is to be able to have a financial statement with no impact from Sacramento at all. So we can really look at what we did, not what they've done to us, you know what I mean? But to really look at the revenues that we've generated and the expenses we've incurred from our own operations, regardless of what Sacramento's done. And I think that is going to be coming that day soon.
It does skew things, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. I mean, like that $6 million adjustment to interest. I mean, we're showing a positive increase in our general fund of $2.7 million. But it could have been $9 million. And that's a huge number. And it's something to be very proud of for our team here and to be able to go to the people and tell them what we've done. I talked a little bit earlier regarding any unfunded pension liability, and we had that discussion.
Yes.
Can you tell us now where you're hearing what that number could be?
PERS is always about 2 years behind, but on the most recent information we have from them, our last actuarial in October 2014, our unfunded liability was, I want to say it was in the neighborhood of about $8 million. The one thing to point out is that built into that rate, part of the rate is paying towards the unfunded liability, and then the other part is paying what they call the normal cost, just your current cost. So built into that is paying towards the unfunded liability to pay that down, but we might decide that's not paying it fast enough, or we're not protected enough from future spikes, those kinds of things. One of the things I haven't even had a chance to talk to the city manager about, or really anyone, is that because we're in a pool, meaning we have less than 100 employees, PERS starting next year is changing the way we pay our PERS. They're only going to apply the rate for the normal cost, and then for the unfunded liability, it's going to be a lump payment every year. So it'll be much more distinct what you're paying towards the unfunded liability versus what are normal current costs.
Is that going to go up substantially? And could we look at an extra $1 million?
It's about a 1% increase from last fiscal year.
Okay. Now, the PERS program in itself, I believe, has a mandated return on their investment of about 7%, I think. And if it's below that, we pay extra. They had a banner year last year. I think it was 17% or something. It was pretty good. Have we been notified of any decrease in our contribution amount because of their success in their investment portfolio?
No, we just were notified of the 1% increase. And again, there's always that 2-year lag time, in their actuarial. So if things continue, we probably could see an adjustment to our rate in about 2 years when they catch up to current time. But no, the spoils haven't been passed on to us yet.
Okay, because I've heard they've done that in the past. So I didn't know if there's been any word on that yet. And now that's basically the gist of my questions. I've already asked them earlier as well. So I just want to say great job for the whole team. Our city has done a phenomenal job controlling costs and in the accounting department, and what you've restructured. Good job.
Thank you.
Okay.
You're still here, and you're still
Yeah. You're smiling.
So for the benefit of the audience, we looked at two things. We're reviewing two things: the financial statements, which we continue to get recognized and awarded for our systems and processes to have the financial statements in place. It was the internal controls that is the opportunity for improvement.
Yes.
And as they all said, you know, we need to send you out to dinner on us. Just so I'll pitch in myself to commend you and your staff. Number one, it takes a lot to be that transparent, inheriting this and inheriting it as a new finance director, and yet owning it versus just saying, you know, fessing up to, I don't know, but we'll fix it, and find a way to get it done, find a way to get the information, and find a way to restructure it with the new technology to get the right team in place. And that's a difference between kind of old school and the new way of thinking. It was very much a siloed kind of component. I know when we did our cuts years ago, we didn't touch finance, and because that was the important element. And maybe that's when we should have started rattling that cage a little bit more in terms of uncovering things that we now have discovered that can be even better. So as the rest of the departments kind of came on board, I mean, now it's your turn to go through those, the tough love, I guess. And I guess you know, several of the questions have been answered. I commend you all on the results of the financial statement findings and knowing that you've got a plan in place. One of the things that talked about top priorities was the timing, was the top priority of the training and education on new systems.
Yes.
Talk to me about the timing of when that's going to happen, given that you've got some temp staff in there.
Well, we're hoping up front, the top priority is to get some training actually on the actual financial system. There's a lot of things the system can do, but there's not, the training hasn't been fully implemented. So I'm hoping late this month or early next month, we'll have some trainers down here from our software company to help moving along with setting up some reports and those kind of things. The finance department, you know, they work through a lot of things and self-learn things, but we really need now somebody to come out and kind of polish some of those things and help us to use the features of the system. With regard to just training in accounting, as those seminars and specific governmental training opportunities come up, if they're overnight or out of state, you'll be seeing those come forward to you. But as soon as they're available, I want to start sending people to those. And we take advantage of webinars a lot and, you know, put them up on the screen in the conference room so more than one of us can watch them at the same time. And we're trying to really, as an aside, but one of the things you'll see in the reorg is we're trying to create a career path for those that have really shown that they have an interest and further their education and want to keep moving forward and eat up these opportunities.
Side note for the record that Councilmember Pena had to leave 6:23 p.m.
Okay.
So will we be ready for budget season with the staff, the complement you have and the systems in place?
Yes.
To have you not pull your hair out completely?
It's still
Looks
there.
Great. Good. Okay. Because we need you. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Okay. With that, any other questions?
I'd like to make a motion.
All right.
With that, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the comprehensive annual financial report for the year ended June 30th, 2014.
Second.
Motion and second. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously with 4 votes. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. We're moving right along here. We're going to move on to reports and informational items, and I will start with Lee.
All right. One, regarding the homelessness committee, as you know, we had our homeless count last week, and I thought, you know, it was pretty cool. What was supposed to start at 5:30 in the morning didn't start till 8:30 in the morning. You know, and I appreciated not waking up at 4 o'clock, but so we were out there. There was, I believe, 4 groups of us, and there's about 3 people in each group. And in my group, we looked at the parking structure over in Point Happy where the Del Taco is, and talked to a gentleman, Mike, over there, who'd been homeless for 30 years. And
30 years.
30 years. And a nice guy, super nice guy, and he knows of the rescue mission, and we gave him, you know, we had a little packet for everybody, a pair of socks and some water and something to eat, and a list of all the phone numbers, whether you're a vet or the homeless shelters and all that, so he had access to the resources available to Mike. There's a couple other gentlemen, one we couldn't find, who we saw a place that he had set up for himself, but he ran off to an area behind the Cliff House. So we went around the other side of the Cliff House in the back by the trees and the wash, and you could see there an area back there where they spend some time. And there's other groups that whether went to Costco or Walmart area or the recycle at Stater Brothers, you know, turning in the cans and whatnot. The unofficial count from the homeless in the city was 10. But there's also counts being done out there, like at the Rescue Mission or Martha's Village, for folks from La Quinta that are there. So I have no idea what those numbers are going to be. But these numbers are substantially higher than years past when we had 0, 1, or 2. So I think we had a much better count for the city of La Quinta. They are looking to make those counts once a year now, but it was cool to participate in that count. The other item I have is regarding the IID, the ECAC board. The ECAC committee is made up of 10 folks from Imperial County and 10 folks from Coachella Valley. There was some discussion out of a few members in El Centro that they can vote on their own chairperson, and then in Coachella we can vote our own chairperson, and trying to separate the committee into two, and we wouldn't go for that. I mean, the bylaws, we have the bylaws out, and they're specifically stated that the committee as a whole votes on those positions, and that went fine. There's another talk about the IID is entering a group, PAC Western, which is a group that has transmission lines, and what happened is the federal government, FERC, is mandating that all utility companies who have transfer lines get into these groups, so the federal government has a handle on the whole country in each area. And so they're looking to join a group that has just the bottom sliver of California and then goes up west to Arizona, Colorado, Washington, Idaho, parts of New Mexico. Because the other option was Cal ISO, the rest of California. And we were concerned that if we got into that, we'd be such a small piece that we're just going to have to follow along whatever they tell us. Now, IAD is kind of holding off on joining us. It's going to cost about $120,000 to join, but they're kind of waiting till some of the rules get a little more clarity with FERC and this West PAC that they're joining. But otherwise, that was a good meeting, and I understand we have a meeting coming up with Desert Sands. So we'll be meeting with them soon.
Yes.
So that's good to hear.
Yes.
That's all I have, Madam Mayor.
That's a good follow-up. Thank you, Lee. Robert.
So I have a few things to report. Let's start with CVEP. I had my first board meeting, and Lee, feel free to jump in whenever you want. So here's the way it goes. We have not collected this deficit because we overspent, but because the revenue didn't come in. So we spent all the money we budgeted, but the revenue did not come in. That was the explanation.
That's not allowed in the city of La Quinta.
It's like, yeah. Wouldn't you do a mid-year review? Wouldn't you do a quarterly, monthly? And there was plenty of displeasure among some of the members about this being discovered. Again, feel free to jump in.
If I can. I mean, I gave the financial report for CVET back in October, and one of the problems that they had is they took the scholarship program and the administrative program and put it into one. Okay. So looking at the financial statement, it looks great reserves and everything else. But when you separate the two, the administrative side is severely in the red. Right? And that was the problem. And the prior management wasn't addressing that. But yeah.
So with that opening statement, then it goes down to the fact that while they reduced employees from 24, they went to 17. They are cash strapped for operation. They only have half payroll reserve, so that is an issue, of course. They're saying they can be solvent until June or July, and they're looking for the community to support. Of course, there have been comments about, how to go in the future, how to move from here. I think truly this is a good opportunity to review what the organization is all about and see what the priorities are and the purpose of the organization, the presence of the organization in east end of the valley. So it can be a good opportunity to review where we are. On the other side, though, some good news. Two gentlemen shows up with their consultant, Wes Hallgren, and wrote a check for $50,000 to CVEP.
Excellent.
And this group is called Western Regional Center, and they specialize in EB5. And they are expecting to bring in the region $250 million, and they project probably 10,000 jobs being created in the region. They made a commitment of $50,000 a year for 5 years. So these folks, so far, they've been putting their money where the mouth is, and they wrote a check. They wrote a big one with, the big marker, but they also wrote the real one. So it was really pleasant to see an organization looking at a mechanism that has been used, sometimes has been abused. EB5 projects needs to follow federal law. And these folks seems to be, I spoke with them afterward, they seem to be very well structured. They are not looking only, direct foreign investment is a big part of what we can go after, and they seem to be a potential good partner for CVEF for the Valley. So they seem to be committed, and they've been talking to several organizations here in the Valley. So I thought Jim Soul is the CEO, Austin Keene is the attorney. So the EB5 system, in a nutshell, the way it works, you need to invest, a foreign investor invest in a qualified project that has been vetted out by an economist. It has to fit certain criteria that has to do with regional center, and that investment is made directly with immediately. The project has to go over a period of 3 years, and it has to generate a certain amount of jobs. Otherwise, it's not qualifiable for the investor to get a green card. So that's
Along with $500,000?
Yeah, that is the minimum investment. However, these funds can be pooled together for bigger investment. So they can be used as a match. They can be minimum, by the way, it's a minimum of $500,000, and depends on the economic condition of the region you're investing in. It can be minimum $500,000 or minimum $1 million, depending the financial condition of the area. CVAC, I did print out some material for you because I like to, out of everything we did yesterday, that was my first meeting again, CVAC transportation. Need any more? I have more.
I'm going to pass one down.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Here, evening, Bill.
One that was one that was very generous with the printer. So yesterday was my first meeting at CVAC Transportation, and one update is the Jefferson Street at the 10 interchange. The contract will be awarded on February 24th, and they are projecting to start the work March, April of this year. Great. So that's, I thought that was a great update to find in the agenda. The other aspect is CV Link, and I thought that was we went through several items, but I think this is important. We approved $40,000 to be spent to research, to apply for grant for the spurs. And actually, there are 4 projected, and one is in La Quinta, which I provided the map over here. This is significant for us because indeed it would bring the CV Link more close to home. It will connect us more closely. Most of it will be what is a Class 2, and a Class 2 is a shared road, where Class 1 is CV Link itself, where only bike and electric vehicle will be on. Class 2 will be designated bike lanes, right? But the whole idea is to drive people down toward 50th, and make this connection toward Indio. So this, basically the $40,000 will be spent to find the money to build these 4. And another important one is the one that will connect CiviLink to Desert Hot Spring. And that's part also of this effort. So I thought that these were the 2 most important aspects of the agenda from yesterday. I did attend the Riverside County Transportation Commission annual assembly or workshop that went over in Palm Springs. It was this past Thursday and Friday. In a nutshell, a lot of the discussion of day 1 was around vehicle per mile travel tax or fee.
Yeah.
So to make a long story short, Mr. Environmentalist that drives the Tesla is plugging in at night and contributing 0 to the maintenance of the roads because he's not buying gas and therefore he's not paying any gasoline taxes that goes to repair our roads. A lot of skepticism in the room, as you may imagine, from a lot of elected officials of the state of California doing a program where they would charge by mile and then potentially give you a credit if you're paying too much in gas taxes, right? And yeah, exactly. That's the look that appeared on everybody's face. Not to be down on the state again, but Supervisor, one of the members, Supervisor Jeffrey, said anyone that's been elected for more than 5 years knows that the legislator will come down on you and they don't have our best interest in mind. And I said, well, I take that offense with that because after 2 months, you pretty much have figured that out. So the big discussion is about road user charge. So you will eventually have a device in your car, or if your car is more modern and you have OnStar, you will be able to report your mileage and you will get charged for the mileage you travel within the state. And you will get a bill, maybe once a year. The pilot will happen. The pilot will happen. The state of Oregon implemented it, and they told us how they did it and private sector involvement and all that. Although some of the issue here, the one that I see the biggest one, is the cost of administering this program. Currently, administering the tax on the gasoline costs 1%. This system, they say something between, well, maybe 5%, but something realistically between 8 to 12%. And it's like, wow, that's a lot of cost, a big cost to
Track mileage.
yeah, to track mileage, and maybe send out a bill for $20 to someone, right? But anyway, on the flip side, there was one of the representatives from Oregon that made a good comment, and she said, you better start having this conversation now when the pool of people that you have to talk to is smaller than 10 years from now. Because the overall, all cars will use less gasoline as the mandated federal standards will come into play. And what you're going to have is the average will increase. Old car, new car, but the average will increase, and you will result with less and less money for the infrastructure. And the cost of infrastructure will not go down, will only go up. Right? So you still have to build the streets. Yeah, you don't use as much gas, but you're still using the roads. How are you going to pay for that? And we cannot create a toll road in every single community. That's the reality. So that's what I have to report. And it was a very, very good meeting, 2 days, very intense. The first day was about them providing us as many information as they could. The second day was a workshop, and they had a lot of our own workshop, and a lot of similar things were said about economic development and the validity of the agency. So that's all.
Very good. Okay, Christy.
Yes. Last Wednesday was the grand opening for Sunline's new building. And it was very well attended. We had an opportunity the city did a proclamation, so I had an opportunity to present that. And the building itself is, it's not pretty, buildings aren't pretty, but it's very utilitarian looking, but really nice inside, seems to be very functional. It's a two-story, I think it's 25,000 square feet. And having been on the Sunline board years ago and being in the trailers, it was quite a change. Good. Very nice. I inherited Don's committees of bylaw and finance. So on the bylaws committee, they have decided that political ads are going to be permitted on buses and on the, what do you call them, the little shelters. But paid advertisement, it must be, you must say that it's a paid advertisement underneath it, and it has to be in a proper font size. In other words, not like this big on a huge bus. So anyway, Sunline will submit all ad content to the cities, and then the city has 5 days to respond. So I suggested, actually I volunteered you, Edie, because if we don't respond to something that's going to be in our city or coming through our city, then they'll just do it. So anyway, you might want to contact, I think, Carolyn Rude, who's there. All right. There was also, under the finance, the Sunline was asking for a raise from $25,000 to $50,000 for the chair or vice chair to co-sign checks. And the rest of us said, no.
Oh, you say I can sign for
No, no. So that passed unanimously. No, we're not doing that. 25,000 is fine. You know, you guys might get together and do something silly. Anyway, under finance, we okayed an agreement with Nyhart Actuary Employment Benefits Consulting Firm for 6 months for $90,000 because they have a problem with their unfunded pension plans or plan. At any rate, then they're going to, during that 6-month period, get out an RFP to have, you know, someone on board. And there's nothing wrong with these people, but they just think that it's best to do the RFP, do it the right way, I guess. It was discovered that in talking with Nyhart, who has been on board, I guess, for a couple of years, they actually had no contract with them at all. And so Lauren Skeever, who's the new CEO there, said, it's amazing what we uncover as time goes on. It's almost every day there's a new surprise, and it's usually not very pleasant. And I said, well, that, you know, that happens when you have someone in place for a while. And you know. So they this is kind of interesting. They had no schedule for funding their pension plans, but when they looked at how they were funded, they were overfunded. So, oh, I know. Now we come to the audit, which it was pretty interesting. The auditors found that they had, Sunline had no accounting manual. They suggested that they get one of those so that when they have people come into the finance department, that they have something to look at. There were no, there never have been any that they could find, SSG, which is a taxi company. No financial statements for them at all. No formal recognition of a pension obligation in any way, shape, or form, although they were paying into a plan, but they didn't know why or, you know, how much it was going, how much they should, and so anyway. The interesting thing about this too is that Sunline calculated their pension cost, well, what they thought they were, on a calendar year basis. And their financial reports for Sunline actually end, it's a fiscal year, June 30th. So you can see how that might be. Okay, here's the final kicker. This was amazing. That's why we love our finance department we have right here. Fiscal 2014 and 13, they overpaid their drivers by $251,000. Hello. Yes. And this was not discovered because I asked until an employee came up and said, I didn't get a raise. What's up with this check? That's how they discovered it. Now, now they are telling the employees, well, they are not telling them, but they're negotiating with the union, because that's what you have to do, and the employees are saying, ha, your mistake, go away.
That's it.
And they can't
No
let
way.
them go, or, so. Anyway, it seems that there was according to them, a glitch in one software talking to another software, but it went on for 18 months of overpayment. Okay, and then, so I was just blown away. I mean, that's a lot of money,
And
$251,000.
did they get a clean audit report?
A good what?
Did they get a clean audit report?
Oh, no. Mm-mm.
No.
No.
Thank you again for taking that committee assignment. I say thank you, appreciate it.
And then on the taxi, then, of course, we have a separate meeting for the taxis, and the only thing that they talked about was trying to get some of the taxi drivers to use their own personal cars. And they have to be outfitted with all the stuff, but instead of leasing a car, where they can use their own personal car, provided it meets certain qualifications. And they're thinking, the taxi companies are thinking that maybe this is one way they can compete with Uber.
Uber, I would say it's very Uber-esque.
It's very Uber-esque. And that's that. It was a lovely day. I was there from 8 till 4.
Wow.
Okay.
I forgot one thing.
Yes?
If I could. We also did a tour of the Riverside County
Well, we're gonna-
Sheriff's
you wanna
Station.
bring that up on
You've got
comments?
that? Okay.
We can all definitely
Yeah, that'd be
wanna
great,
thank-
because they did a phenomenal job on that.
On my committees, CVAG and E&E actually meet next week. I have my first executive committee as well in February. I did bring the annual report from the Convention Visitors Bureau for all of you, the business development plan and report. It's phenomenal, so if you get a chance to cruise through it, you'll hear of an organization that's doing things right in terms of bringing in the revenue, attracting people to the destination for TOT revenue throughout our valley, and all the plans they've got and all the places they've been. So Scott just does an awesome job there.
He really has done a great job since he started that.
He is, yes, absolutely. Let's see, I don't have anything on SCAG or League or Coachella Valley Water District policy, so we'll move on to,
Can I just say something in regard to the Visitor Bureau and CV Link? At one point, we will have to have a discussion about how we're going to pay for maintenance of CV Link, and that is coming forward.
Right.
Okay,
I'm
so
aware
just want to
of-
make sure
yep.
that we all know that we're going to have that discussion the next 2 months.
Well, that's been the controversy for all the municipalities, is we think it's great, but who's paying for the maintenance? So there are plans being discussed of how to help mitigate the burden on our budget to do that, potentially, yeah.
A lot of that,
Absolutely.
the design of it too, I mean, to be able to design it in the sense that the maintenance is a lower cost. and
Right,
not get-
exactly, get too elaborate. Correct. Yeah. Okay, departmental reports. City manager, deputy city manager?
We have no reports.
Okay. City attorney?
Nothing to report?
Okay.
Madam Mayor, honorable council members, there is a department report from the clerk's office in your packet. It's regarding the municipal code project, so if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, we just wanted to give you an update on that. We've been talking about it for some time, and we thought it might be important for you to better understand the scope of it.
Yeah, the 18 months was long for me, but I understand the enormity of the project, and I just wish that some of the last things that seem like they're going to be on the list should be moved up. The things that can make a difference with us being able to approve things
Things that
faster,
take the
having-
longest,
Yes.
yeah. We, for some of the titles, we may actually have to look to outside assistance for those.
Okay.
Because the staff the staff time that is needed to focus on all of those probably doesn't exist, because it does take quite a bit of time, which means they're not doing what they normally would have to do. But we'll be discussing that with Les and Tim in the next, very shortly, a week or so.
I'd be
Yeah.
open to ideas to speed that up.
Okay.
Definitely. Okay. Thank you. Community development report is there? No. Mayor and council members' items. Okay, Lee?
Well, yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to the Lieutenant Walton and his group. They did a great job in the tour of the thermal facility. pretty impressive facility, and I really appreciate the time and the energy that they gave us to show us the facility and that area for La Quinta. And that they have our pictures on the wall. They wouldn't let me put any mustaches on anybody or anything like that. But I just want to say thank you, Lieutenant, and I think you guys did a great job. Appreciate it.
Christie?
The only thing that I have to say is that, given Sunline's problems and CVEP's problems, we as electeds who serve on these committees have a responsibility to look at things like this and not just, I'm not lecturing anybody, but not just okaying them and, thinking everybody's doing the right thing.
Right.
And stand up sometimes when you feel like it's
You're
not going well.
absolutely right. I mean, when I was originally on that homelessness shelter committee 10 years ago, and they were looking at Royce or building a facility in Palm Springs, and there was 20 of us on that board. Nobody but me was asking, how are you going to pay for it? Where's the money going to come to pay for this whole thing? And they said, oh, don't worry about it. We'll get to that later. But I could not understand why no one else was asking. I mean, there's very intelligent people on there. And all too often, they'll just figure, oh, don't worry about it. They got it worked out. When they don't.
No.
And the tough questions need to be asked.
They do.
And sometimes, and I should have then asked multiple times. And I asked that question twice over that 6-month time frame, and each time I go, oh, don't worry about it. We'll get to that later. We'll get grants. We'll get nonprofit grants. Well, don't worry about it. But I needed to, because at the end of the day, they said, all right, now La Quinta come up with $120,000 a year. For how many years? Oh, we don't know yet, but don't worry about that. Just pay us $120,000 a year. That's not going to work. Right. And then later we end up saying, oh, well, you guys didn't cover your commitment. We never made a commitment.
Correct.
Right.
But this is why I'm cautious on this East Valley Coalition and forming a JPA for yet another tie to what is an entry fee of $10,000 that, will increase over and over again to fill the shortfall on what isn't clearly defined as what the metrics and results are going to be versus we'll staff it and have an office. So you're right, Christie.
Yes. And if I may also, in particular when you have on the report from CVEP that their iHub for the East Valley is ready, but it doesn't have any funding. So I don't know what it means being ready, but I agree with you. I mean, we need to be vigilant, and it takes quite a bit of commitment of time to go through those agenda and really be sure that we vote on the right things. And that's why I wanted to mention the civil link maintenance, because that is a discussion that's going to happen.
Right. Any other council member items for you before I do a short list? Okay. I do want to thank Lieutenant Walton and his team for an outstanding tour. I think day 2, we had a blast. We got to join some staff there and really appreciate the dedication. The resources are there. We've approved those resources over the years. It's a beautiful facility, but being able to interact individually with all the officers and just understand their commitment to the city of La Quinta and how much they appreciate our residents. One of the comments that, we talked about is the interaction and why they like La Quinta, and they're like, people thank us even after we give them a ticket. I mean, they're just, they're appreciative of the public safety coverage. And so a lot was learned, and it was really a testament to why we pride ourselves on the service and the commitment we've got.
That structure, by the way, was built in RDA funds.
Yes, it was. Thank goodness it was there.
Yeah, Supervisor Wilson spent all that money, so there wasn't anything left.
I saw resident Helene already left, but next walk with the mayor and council, because some of us will be going, will be on Saturday, February 21st at 8 a.m., and we're starting at the La Quinta Park, across the street from the high school. So we'll be doing a walk versus a treacherous hike. And we'll have an opportunity to interact and look at some of the neighboring communities, some of the landscape challenges, things like that. I also want to recognize the museum staff, Audrey and Robin. I don't know if you noticed in the items of interest, I happened to run into Andrea on her way out on Saturday after the car show, because I was parked right there, and talked about if they were busy today, and they said they had a record number of 60 guests on Saturday with the car show activity. Right. And then pardon?
We set a new record.
Set a new record. And then I read that they had a gallery of flags. So they had all the racing flags there and were able to come in and see the racing flags that was, coincided with the car show. So I had asked if there was a collaboration, and you all created that on your own because the car show was going to be across the street. I think that's brilliant. A great way to tie in the community resources there. But I would then encourage future collaboration between our chamber and entities like the museum, so we can do more things like that. I mean, it was crowded, it was busy, the park was humming with people that either liked the cars or just were taking their kids to play. I mean, it was a great visual for La Quinta and all of this stuff, and again, that was very impressive to tie that in, so thank you for that creativity. And then lastly is State of the City is this Thursday. So we look forward to sharing updates with the residents and business community on what a great year we've had and what's to come in our gem of the desert. So with that, any other comments? With that, I'll ask for, no, actually, we're going to recess to close, we're going to recess to closed session.
I'll take it back.
Correct?
Right, recess again back into closed session.
Recess again back into closed session, and we'll conclude our presence here for the evening until adjournment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Who's the walk again?
21st in the morning, 8 to...
21st.
I need to calendar. We need a calendar.